The red folder slammed onto my watch repair bench at sunrise. My son pointed at my trembling hands and snapped, "Enough." My wife was right. "You're broke, sick, and a liar. From today on, I don't have a father like you." I looked him straight in the eye and quietly said, "Those papers are fake." He turned his back and walked away without looking back. Months later, he walked into a luxurious boardroom and froze when he saw who was sitting in that chair. "I'm glad you're here. This story starts quietly, but won't leave you unchanged." Before we continue, drop a quick comment for me. How are you feeling today in one word? Your perspective matters to someone reading this today. Just a note, this story includes fictional elements to highlight the lesson. The message is what matters most. The screwdriver slipped from my trembling hand, and I knew these shaking hands would be used against me. I just didn't know it would be this soon. The tiny gears scattered across my workbench like silver rain. I watched them settle into the grooves of old wood, catching morning light from the window. Outside, Lake Michigan fog lifted slowly the way it always did in July. Inside my workshop, everything smelled of machine oil and aged leather watch straps. My coffee had gone cold in its chipped mug an hour ago. I am Floyd Mercer, 68 years old, and my shaking hands have repaired hundreds of watches in this lakeside cabin near Leland. But no one knows they also built a maritime empire worth $186 million. The Parkinson's was diagnosed 8 months ago. Stage 1, the neurologist said. Mild tremor. Fully competent. I remember those words because I knew I'd need them later. I didn't know how soon later would come. I picked up the scattered gears one by one, my thumb and forefinger struggling with the smallest piece. The antique pocket watch on my bench was a 1920s Hamilton brought in by a customer from Traverse City. Beautiful mechanism, delicate work. My hands shook holding the tweezers, but I'd learned to work with the tremor, timing my movements between the worst shakes. That's what people don't understand about Parkinson's stage 1. Your mind stays sharp. Your hands betray you, but your thoughts remain clear as lake water on a calm morning. I could still run a company. I could still make decisions worth millions. I just couldn't hold a screwdriver steady anymore. My son Brent lives 20 miles south in Muskegon. He owns Brooks Harbor Construction, builds commercial docks and marina infrastructure. Good business. He built it himself over 15 years, no help from me beyond the occasional loan he always paid back. He thinks I survive on Social Security and watch repairs. He thinks his father is a retired tradesman living modestly by the lake. He doesn't know I'm the chairman of Brooks Maritime Holdings. 20 years ago, I founded the company with Virgil Townsend, my college friend turned maritime attorney. Virgil was 45 then, with silver hair even at that age, and a reputation for ruthless loyalty to his clients. We structured everything under the name N.W. Brooks, my middle initials, not my surname. The business grew quietly, acquiring shipping routes and harbor leases across the Great Lakes. By 2010, we were worth $50 million. By 2020, $186 million. Virgil asked me once, sitting in his Grand Rapids law office overlooking the river. "You're sitting on $186 million and driving a 12-year-old Silverado. What's the point of being rich if you live like you're broke?" "The point is that my son doesn't need to know I'm rich," I said. "He needs to know he can make it on his own. The money's for security, not for show." Virgil shook his head, but filed the papers the way I asked. We set up walls of legal privacy, shell companies, trusts, nothing illegal, just opaque. I remained chairman. Virgil remained the only person who knew Floyd Mercer of Leland, and N.W. Brooks of Brooks Maritime were the same man. What does a father owe his son, the truth or the chance to stand on his own 2 feet? I chose the second. I wanted Brent to build something himself, to know his worth wasn't tied to my bank account. I watched him struggle through recessions and bad contracts. I watched him bid on projects and lose to bigger firms. I watched him slowly, carefully build Brooks Harbor Construction into a respectable mid-size operation. Brent builds harbors for others. He never knew his father owned the very harbors his docks lead into. For 20 years, I kept this split life. During the week, I'd drive the Silverado to Grand Rapids for board meetings, wearing suits I kept in Virgil's office. On weekends, I'd return to Leland, put on flannel shirts and repair watches in my cabin workshop. The employees at Brooks Maritime knew me as N.W. Brooks, the chairman who preferred privacy. My neighbors in Leland knew me as Floyd, the watchmaker who lived quietly and fixed their grandfather clocks. It worked. Until the Parkinsons. You might ask why a man would hide such wealth from his only child. Let me tell you. Love makes fools of us in ways money never can. I thought I was protecting him. I thought I was teaching him independence. I thought when the time came, when I got sick, when I got old, I could tell him the truth, and he'd understand. I thought I had time. I finished reassembling the pocket watch, my hands steadier now in late morning. The tremor came in waves, worse when I was tired or stressed. I wound the crown slowly, feeling the spring tension. The mechanism caught. The second hand began its sweep. Tick, tick, tick. The watch ticked steadily in my palm. Fixed. Running true. If only everything else could be repaired so simply. I set it down and looked out the workshop window. The fog had burned off completely. Lake Michigan stretched flat and gray to the horizon. A freighter moved slowly north, probably headed to Mackinac. I wondered if it was one of ours. I had no idea that in 3 days, the son I raised would stand at that door with a folder in his hand and betrayal in his eyes. I didn't know that 6 months ago, at a business banquet in Detroit, a photograph had been noticed by the wrong person. I didn't know that photograph, me in a suit, younger, standing at a 2008 harbor inauguration, had started a chain of events that would destroy everything I'd built, both the company and the family. I didn't know my daughter-in-law had already begun her research, but sitting there that July morning watching the lake and listening to the watch tick, I felt something shift. Nothing I could name. Just the sense that the walls I'd carefully built between my two lives were thinner than I'd thought. Thinner than they should be. I looked at the pocket watch running perfectly in my trembling hand, then out at the lake where morning fog was lifting. In 3 days, my son would walk through that door. He would have a look on his face I had never seen before, the look of a man who had already made up his mind. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last morning I would ever feel safe in my own home. I should have known 6 months earlier when the photo was still hanging on that wall. The photo had been there for 15 years before my daughter-in-law stopped in front of it, and everything I'd built in secret began to unravel. March 2023. Business banquet at a luxury hotel in Detroit's Harbor District. Virgil had insisted good for maintaining industry connections, he said. I wore one of the suits I kept in his office, drove 2 hours from Leland, and planned to leave early. My son Brent Mercer, 40 years old and owner of Brooks Harbor Construction, had invited me as his guest. He had his mother's hazel eyes and the kind of work ethic I'd spent 30 years teaching him, and no idea his father was worth a fortune. He introduced me to contractors and engineers, proud to show off his old man who still worked with his hands. Leora came with him. Leora Mercer, my son's 35-year-old wife with her marketing degree and practiced smile, spent most of the evening networking separately. I'd always found her pleasant enough, polite, ambitious, the kind of woman who remembered everyone's name. The banquet hall had photos lining the corridor walls, decades of Great Lakes maritime history. I'd walked past them twice without paying attention. Then Brent pulled me aside, and when I turned back, Leora was standing in front of one particular photograph. 2008. Brooks Maritime's first major harbor expansion in Muskegon. Me younger 15 years and 20 pounds ago, wearing a dark suit and shaking hands with the city councilman. The caption read, N.W. Brooks Chairman, Brooks Maritime Holdings. Leora held a wine glass. Her head tilted as she studied the photo. Not a glance. A study. When I approached, she didn't look away. "Who is that in the photo, Dad?" she asked, pointing at the man in the suit. "Me? Younger? Before the Parkinson's? Still unmistakably me." "Oh, just an old acquaintance from years ago," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Business connection." She smiled, sipped her wine, said nothing more. But I saw her eyes linger on that caption. N.W. Brooks, Chairman. We left an hour later. I drove back to Leland thinking I'd deflected it successfully. I was wrong. That night in the home she shared with my son Leora sat at the kitchen table after Brent had gone to bed. I didn't know this then. I learned it later, piecing together the evidence she left behind. She opened her laptop. The kitchen was dark except for the screen's glow. She typed N.W. Brooks, Brooks Maritime. The search results came up immediately. Chairman profile, corporate filings, news articles. 2008 inauguration photos showing the same man who'd stood next to her at dinner wearing a J.C. Penney jacket. She cross-referenced. Floyd Mercer, age 68. Location Leland, Michigan. Timeline matched. She enlarged the 2008 harbor inauguration photograph on her screen and held up her phone to compare it against a photo she'd taken of Floyd at the banquet. Same jaw, same brow, same slight asymmetry in the left eye. 20 years older in the banquet photo, thinner with the tremor. But the same man. Floyd Mercer equals N.W. Brooks equals Brooks Maritime Holdings equals $186 million. She sat back in that dark kitchen and stared at the screen. Not shocked. Calculating. I didn't know she'd seen that photo. I didn't know she'd gone home and opened that laptop. I didn't know that in the dark kitchen at 1 a.m. my daughter-in-law had just decided I was worth more to her dead than alive. She clicked through every article, saved PDFs of corporate filings, made screenshots, created a folder on her desktop labeled Research. She pulled up my 2015 will publicly filed with probate court. To my son Brent Mercer, all shares and assets of Brooks Maritime Holdings upon my death. No spouse, no other children. Everything to Brent. Then Michigan probate law, equitable distribution statutes, spousal rights in estate proceedings during marriage. The math was complex, but promising. If Brent inherited while married to her, Michigan's equitable distribution law gave courts broad discretion to award a substantial portion of marital assets to a spouse, potentially 40 to 50%, depending on circumstances. If Floyd died while they were married and happy, she could argue for access to $70, $80, even $90 million through divorce proceedings after inheritance cleared. But she couldn't wait for me to die naturally. I was 68 and healthy aside from early Parkinson's. I could live another 20 years. She couldn't risk me telling Brent the truth. Couldn't risk me changing my will. Couldn't risk divorce before inheritance. 6 months. That's how long it takes to plan a murder when you're patient enough. March through August 2023. She investigated quietly, downloaded corporate documents, studied trust structures, researched conservatorship law, elder abuse statutes, medical power of attorney. She attended every family dinner and photographed my trembling hands, collected repair invoices with my shaky signature, memorized my routines when I woke up, when I worked, when I was alone. She asked Brent casual questions about my health, my memory, my independence. Brent always defended me. Dad's sharp as ever, just has the tremor. Good. She needed Brent to believe I was competent right up until the moment she proved I wasn't. By August, her plan was complete. She'd found the legal mechanism, conservatorship. If she could prove I was mentally incompetent due to neurological decline, she could have me declared unable to manage my own affairs. Brent would be appointed conservator. She would guide every decision, The maritime empire would become hers to control. All she needed was fabricated medical evidence, a cooperative lawyer, and the right moment to strike. I attended that banquet because Brent invited me. I stood in front of that photo because someone asked me to explain the harbor project. I smiled. I wore the modest jacket. I lived in the cabin alone, no witnesses to my daily competence. I signed birthday cards with my trembling hand. Every dinner where I said, "I'm just a watchmaker," gave her ammunition. The photo I posed for. The modest life I performed. The isolation I chose. The son I loved too much to burden with truth. She took 6 months to build that trap. I handed her every brick without knowing. By September, she'd stopped collecting bricks and started building the wall. I learned what followed through forensic reconstruction. Merritt's investigation recovered emails, Meridian's seized records, and Leora's own devices analyzed by federal examiners after her arrest. Piece by piece, the picture became complete. $340,000 in fake losses printed on authentic bank letterhead, delivered by a document forgery network in 4 business days. That's what it cost to destroy my son's faith in me. August 2023. Leora's home office afternoon light through the window. She opened her laptop to find an encrypted email from Meridian Document Services. Subject line package delivered encryption key 4782-MDS, destroy after review. She entered the code. 15 PDF files downloaded automatically. Cryptocurrency exchange loss statements, showing I'd invested heavily in Bitcoin during the 2022 collapse. Total loss $127,000. Predatory loan contracts from LendingTree showing I'd borrowed $85,000 at 34% APR. Debt collection letters from 3 agencies: Great Lakes Recovery Services, Midwest Collections, Northern Credit Bureau, demanding payment on $128,000 in defaulted accounts. Every document had authentic-looking letterhead: Chase Bank, Coinbase, collection agency logos, professional typography, watermarks that looked real if you didn't verify them with the actual institutions. And every single signature was mine, because they were. Photocopied from a 2019 watch repair invoice I'd given a customer, digitally lifted and pasted onto every form. My real signature on fake documents. The perfect forgery, half-truth, half-lie, impossible to distinguish without calling the banks. Which Leora would make sure my son never did. The cost for this package: $8,500 wired to an account in Indianapolis. Meridian Document Services specialized in this kind of work. Financial document forgery for conservatorship cases, divorce proceedings, custody battles. Any situation where you needed someone to look incompetent with money. They had a 98% success rate according to their encrypted website. The documents wouldn't withstand bank verification, but they weren't designed to. They were designed to break hearts before verification could happen. Leora printed all 15 pages on high-quality paper stock. She laid them across her desk and studied each one, held them up to the light, checked the weight, examined the signatures. Perfect. Then she did something brilliant. She took her coffee mug half-full room temperature and carefully stained the corners of 3 documents. The oldest ones, supposedly from 2021. Made them look aged, handled, worried over. Like I'd been carrying these debts for years. She assembled everything chronologically in a red leather folder. Earliest documents, first, latest at the back. Created a timeline of financial collapse. Small cryptocurrency investment in 2021 grew too large. Crashed in 2022, took out predatory loans to cover losses, defaulted on everything by mid-2023. A believable story of an old man making stupid decisions. Then came the masterstroke. She pulled out a yellow sticky note and wrote in her own handwriting, "Dad, please call me about these. We need to talk." L. Stuck it to the inside cover of the folder. Now it looked like she'd discovered this months ago, like she'd been trying to help me privately, like she was only bringing it to Brent now because she had no choice, because the situation had become too desperate to handle quietly. Concerned daughter-in-law, reluctant messenger, protector of family. The performance was already written. I didn't know about the cryptocurrency losses she invented. Didn't know about the predatory loans with 34% interest. Didn't know my own signature from a watch repair invoice had been digitally copied and weaponized against me. Didn't know that while I sat in my cabin workshop fixing an antique pocket watch, she sat 20 miles south assembling my destruction. She closed the folder. The leather made a soft snap. She placed it on her desk and stared at it for 10 minutes. Then she picked up her phone and scheduled the performance for exactly 1 week from today. September 1st, 2023, Friday evening. Brent would be exhausted from a long work week. Perfect timing. Tired people are emotional people. Emotional people don't ask to see bank statements. Emotional people believe their wives. Late that night, she moved the red folder to the kitchen table, positioned it exactly where Brent would see it when he walked in. Not too obvious, not too hidden. Just there, like she'd been sitting with it, working up the courage to show him. She walked to the hallway mirror and practiced her expression. Concerned, worried, tearful but trying to be strong. She smudged her mascara slightly with one finger, tested different ways to say the opening line. I didn't want to tell you this, but I can't keep it from you anymore. She said it 5 times, adjusted the tremor in her voice, found the perfect balance between devastated and composed. Then she rehearsed the crucial moment, the line that would stop Brent from calling the banks. So don't embarrass him by calling. He's already humiliated. Just, let's figure out how to help him quietly. Appeal to his compassion. Make verification seem cruel. Frame silence as kindness. $340,000. That's how much I supposedly lost. That's also exactly the amount Leora researched would break Brent's heart, without seeming impossible, devastating, but believable for a man living on Social Security. Large enough to justify emergency intervention. Small enough that he wouldn't think to question the documents. She'd calculated everything. That red folder lay on the kitchen table at 11 p.m. on August 23, 2023. The house was silent. The clock on the wall ticked toward September, toward the performance, toward the moment my son would stop trusting me. I sat in my cabin 60 miles north, finishing that antique pocket watch. The gears fit perfectly. The mechanism ran smooth. I wound it and listened to it tick. Fixed. Running true. I had no idea that 20 miles south in a kitchen, I'd eaten dinner in dozens of times, a red folder weighted with my signature on 15 lies. As I stood in that office, I was completely blind to the machinery of my own destruction. I didn't know the safe code had been changed by a professional, nor did I know that my entire existence was being dismantled from 20 miles away. I was living on borrowed time, and the clock was already ticking toward a silence I couldn't yet hear. 7 days after that folder was assembled, it opened. The performance began at 6:47 p.m. with tears that had been scheduled for exactly that moment. My son walked through the door, exhausted and trusting, and my daughter-in-law destroyed him in under 8 minutes. September 1st, 2023, Friday evening. Brent came home after a 14-hour shift at a construction site near Muskegon. I wasn't there to see this. I learned it later from the pieces Leora left behind from the timeline that eventually emerged. But I can see it as clearly as if I'd been standing in that kitchen. Leora had been sitting at the table for exactly 20 minutes. Not 19. Not 21. 20 minutes was optimal, long enough that her tears would look real short enough she wouldn't lose focus. The mascara smudge on her left cheek was perfect. The red folder centered under the kitchen lamp. Dinner warming on the stove, his favorite beef stew, the smell filling the house. Brent walked through the door at 6:47 p.m., dropped his keys on the counter, saw her sitting there. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. She looked up, let her voice crack exactly the way she'd practiced. "I didn't want to tell you this, but I can't keep it from you anymore." She slid the red folder across the table. Brent sat down, slowly opened it, started reading. His face went pale. I imagine his hands began to shake, not from Parkinson's like mine, but from shock. $340,000. His voice barely audible. "In 2 years, how did I not know about this?" "He made me promise not to tell you," Leora said, tears falling on cue. "Your father begged me to keep it secret. He was ashamed. But it's gotten so bad, Brent. The collection agencies are calling. I had to tell you." Brent flipped through the pages. Bitcoin losses, predatory loans at 34% interest, debt collection letters. Every document with my signature at the bottom. His father's handwriting on paper after paper, admitting to financial incompetence. He reached for his phone. This was the crucial moment. The moment Leora had rehearsed 50 times in front of that hallway mirror. The moment everything could collapse if she didn't land the line perfectly. "Don't," she said quickly, reaching across to touch his hand. "Please don't call the bank. Don't embarrass him. Your father has pride, Brent. It's one of the few things he has left. If you call and verify these, he'll know I broke his confidence. He'll know I told you when he begged me not to. Can you imagine how humiliated he'll feel?" Brent looked at the phone, looked at the papers, looked at his wife's tear-stained face. He put the phone down. "You're right," he said quietly. "I should talk to him first. Let him explain in his own words. Give him a chance to come to you," Leora pressed. "When he's ready. Don't take his dignity." Brent nodded, closed the folder, sat in silence for a long time. 8 minutes. That's how long it took to make my son believe I was a financial disaster hiding in shame. 8 minutes of perfect performance, scheduled tears, rehearsed pauses, strategic appeals to compassion that prevented verification. I didn't see this conversation. Didn't hear her voice crack on cue. Didn't watch my son's face collapse as he read those fabricated losses. But I felt the result the next morning when he walked through my door with a look I'd never seen before. September 2nd, 2023, 9 a.m. I was in my workshop repairing a ship's chronometer morning coffee steaming beside the workbench. Heard Brent's truck pull up the dirt driveway. Unexpected. He never visited on Saturday mornings, always too busy with weekend construction jobs. I set down my screwdriver and went to the door. "Brent didn't expect you this." He walked past me without a word. No greeting, no hug. Face cold. He stopped in the middle of my workshop, turned and pulled the red folder from under his arm. "Where did the money go, Dad?" His voice flat. Clinical. The $340,000. The cryptocurrency losses. The predatory loans. I stared at him. "Son, I don't know what you're talking about." He opened the folder. Showed me the first page. Chase Bank letterhead. My signature at the bottom. A cryptocurrency investment account I'd never opened, showing a loss of $127,000. "I've never invested in cryptocurrency," I said, genuinely confused. "Brent, I don't even know how to." These are fake." He held up the stack of papers. "All 15 of these documents with your signature are fake." "Yes." I reached for the papers, but he pulled them back. "Those documents are completely fabricated. That's not my. I trust my wife." 4 words. That's all it took. 4 words to erase 68 years of being his father. 4 words to choose a woman he'd known 8 years over the man who'd raised him alone. 4 words that ended everything. He closed the folder, turned toward the door. Brent, wait. My voice cracking now, no performance, just real desperation. Please, let me explain. Those documents are forged. I can prove. Leora said you'd deny it. He kept walking. She said you'd be too ashamed to admit the truth. She was trying to protect you, Dad. Trying to give you a chance to come to me yourself. She's lying. He stopped at the door. Didn't turn around. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat and final. Enough. My wife was right. You're broke, sick, and a liar. From today on, I don't have a father like you. Those papers are fake, I said quietly. He walked out without looking back. Door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the morning silence. I stood there with my coffee mug in my trembling hand. Walked to the door. Watched his truck back down the driveway, turn onto the dirt road, disappear through the pine trees toward the main highway. Lake Michigan waves gentle behind the cabin. Morning fog lifting. Birds singing like nothing had changed. I stood there and knew, though, I couldn't say how, that something in Brent's eyes had been final. Not just anger, not just disappointment, decision, cold finality. Like he'd already chosen what came next and was simply executing steps now. I watched his car disappear behind the trees. Didn't know it was the last time I'd stand freely on my own land. That evening I tried to prove him wrong. The safe code I'd used for 15 years stopped working the same day my son stopped believing me, and I knew immediately that wasn't a coincidence. September 2nd, hours after watching Brent's truck disappear. I sat in my home office staring at the locked safe, thinking about what I could show him to prove the documents were forged. Brooks' maritime corporate papers, share certificates, trust documents. Every piece of evidence proving Floyd Mercer and N.W. Brooks were the same person locked in that safe. I punched in the code. 2847. The address of the house on Elm Street where my wife and I lived before she died. I'd used that code since 2008 when I installed the safe. The keypad beeped red. Wrong code. I tried again, slower this time. 2847. Red beep, wrong code. Third time checking each number twice before pressing. 2, 8, 4, 7. Red, wrong. I sat back in the chair, staring at the safe. Tried to think of any other code I might have used. My birthday. No, I'd never used personal dates for security. Brent's birthday. No. The company founding date, no. Then I remembered. Last Tuesday, September 28th, I'd driven to Grand Rapids to meet Virgil at a cafe near his office quarterly report review. 2 hours, maybe 3. I'd left the cabin at 9 a.m., returned at 1 p.m. Leora had keys. Brent had given her a spare years ago for emergencies. 4 hours was more than enough time to call a locksmith, enough time for someone who specialized in this kind of work to bypass the factory override and reset the combination entirely. Meridian Document Services had resources beyond forged paperwork. A safe technician was nothing compared to what they'd already provided her. She'd had time, she'd had access, she'd known exactly where to look, and she'd had professionals to help her do it cleanly. Every document proving who I am, I said to the empty office. Share certificates, corporate structure, trust papers, all of it locked behind a code I don't have. The safe had been changed before Brent even walked into my workshop with that red folder. She'd stripped my evidence while I still thought I was safe. I tried calling Brent that night. Picked up my cell phone, dialed his number. The call didn't ring, just clicked and went to a recording. The number you are trying to reach is not available. Not his voicemail. Not please leave a message. Just not available. I tried again. Same recording. I called his office number at Brooks Harbor Construction. A mechanical voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. But that was his business line. He'd had that number for 8 years. Over the next 3 weeks, I tried 20 times. Cell phone, office, email to brentmercer@brooksharbor.com that bounced back user unknown. An old secondary cell number from 2019 that rang 3 times, then disconnected. I left voicemails on every attempt, not knowing if they were going into the void. "My Brent, it's Dad. Please call me back. Those documents weren't real. I can prove it if you'll just listen. Please." "Son, this is the 7th time I've called. I don't know if you're getting these. The documents Leora showed you are forgeries. Call me. I love you. Brent, it's Dad. Call 20. October 1st. I love you. Please don't forget that." 20 calls. That's how many times I tried to reach my son before I understood he wasn't ignoring me. He couldn't hear me. She'd built a wall of silence around me, and I was shouting into nothing. Mid-October, I tried letters. Handwritten 5 of them. My Parkinson's made writing difficult. Each letter took 2 hours, hand-cramping words, shaky but legible. I addressed them to Brooks Harbor Construction, 428 Harbor Point Drive, Muskegon, MI. The business address I'd used for years when sending birthday cards or Christmas checks. I sent them certified mail. Signature required. At least then, I'd know someone received them. A week later, all 5 came back. Red stamps across the envelopes, addressee unknown. Return to sender. I called the Muskegon post office. That business closed their mailbox in September, the clerk told me. No forwarding address on file. "But the business is still operating," I said. "My son owns it." "I'm just telling you what the system shows, sir." Box closed September 12th. September 12th. 10 days after Brent stopped speaking to me. She'd changed the mailing address, made it so even the postal service couldn't find him. I held those 5 returned letters in my trembling hands and stared at the red stamps. Every word I'd written, explanations, evidence, pleas, sent back unread. I thought about driving to Muskegon, showing up at his office unannounced. But what if he called the police? What if she'd convinced him I was dangerous? What if my own son had me arrested for trespassing? Would that make everything worse? I was a 68-year-old man with Parkinson's trying to prove I wasn't a financial disaster. How would that look to police, to courts? So I waited and called Virgil's office again. He was traveling, Seattle conference, his assistant said. Back November 15th. 3 more weeks. Late October afternoon, I stood at the edge of Lake Michigan behind my cabin. Cold front moving in temperature, dropping into the 40s. Gray sky. Fog rolling across the water, thick enough I couldn't see the horizon. Autumn storms were coming. I thought about my situation, listed it in my head like evidence at trial. Evidence locked in safe with changed code. Inaccessible. Communication. All channels to Brent blocked. Phone disconnected. Email bouncing. Mail returned. Silence. Witnesses I lived alone. Neighbors barely knew my name. Virgil was traveling for 3 more weeks. Defense none that I could access. If I disappeared tomorrow, if someone made me disappear, took me somewhere, committed me, would anyone notice? Would anyone come? Virgil would return November 15th and try to call. Eventually, he'd come looking. Eventually. But between now and then, I was completely alone. The fog moved closer, swallowing the shoreline. Wind cut through my jacket. I could hear waves crashing harder as the storm front approached. Brent thinks I'm a gambling addict, I said to the empty beach. Virgil's in Seattle until mid-November. My safe is locked. My son won't answer. My letters are returned. No one knew I was here. No one would come if I vanished. I stood by Lake Michigan in October, cold. No one knows I'm here. No one will come if I vanish. While I stood by that cold lake watching fog roll in, my daughter-in-law was making a phone call that would erase my competence on paper. My neurologist never knew her diagnosis would be weaponized. Stage 1 Parkinson's in her file, Stage 3 cognitive decline in the document my daughter-in-law showed the court. Mid-October 2023. Leora called Traverse City Neurology 30 miles from my cabin, asked to speak with someone about Floyd Mercer's Parkinson's management. The receptionist connected her to Dr. Simone Frost, 52, the neurologist who diagnosed me 8 months earlier. Dr. Frost had silver-gray hair and a reputation for thorough assessments. Her notes in my file were clear: Stage 1 tremor, mild cognition intact, fully competent. I'm Floyd Mercer's daughter-in-law. Leora said, voice concerned and professional. We're worried about his tremors worsening. Could we review his current status? Just want to make sure we're supporting him properly. She had come prepared. Before calling, she had forged a simple HIPAA authorization form, Floyd's signature lifted from the same 2019 watch repair invoice she would later use for everything else. She handed it to the receptionist when she arrived in person. To staff processing dozens of forms weekly, it looked identical to legitimate paperwork. Dr. Frost pulled up my file on her computer. Let me see. Floyd Mercer, 68, diagnosed February 2023. Could I get a copy of his current evaluation for our family records? With the authorization form on file, Dr. Frost printed the report, 2 pages summarizing my diagnosis and prognosis. Stage 1 Parkinson's, mild symptoms, independent functioning, capacity intact, prognosis stable for years with proper medication management. She handed Leora the report. His condition is quite manageable. Stage 1 can remain stable for a long time. He should continue his current medication regimen and follow up every 6 months. Leora thanked her, left the office with that report in her purse. Dr. Frost thought she'd helped a concerned family member understand a manageable diagnosis. That night, Leora sat in her home office and opened the PDF on her computer. The report Dr. Frost had given her scanned into editable format. She clicked on the text, Stage 1 Parkinson's disease, selected the 1 and changed it to 3. Stage 3 Parkinson's disease. Mild resting tremor became severe tremor with balance impairment. No signs of cognitive impairment became cognitive impairment noted during examination. She scrolled to the paragraph that read, Patient is fully competent for all medical, financial, and legal decisions. Independent functioning maintained. Capacity intact. Deleted the entire paragraph. I didn't know Dr. Frost had examined my records. Didn't know Leora requested that appointment claiming family concern. Didn't know that at the exact moment I stood by Lake Michigan feeling isolated, my competence was being erased on paper. Stage 1, becoming Stage 3 with 3 keystrokes. Leora created a second document. A fake supplemental evaluation, dated 1 week after Dr. Frost's original assessment. Claimed rapid cognitive decline. Recommended immediate supervision. Used medical terminology copied from Parkinson's research sites to make it sound authentic. She printed both documents on high-quality paper. Hid Dr. Frost's honest original report in a locked drawer. Kept the altered Stage 3 version for court filing. 2 days later, she contacted Meridian Document Services again. The same network that had provided the fake financial documents. Shatutiondarm. Need a durable power of attorney, she wrote in the encrypted message. Client signature available from source document 2019 invoice. Backdated to September 15, 2023. Full medical and financial authority to attorney in fact. Meridian's response came within an hour. Send signature source. Fee $2,200. Leora scanned the 2019 watch repair invoice. The one where I'd written received payment for Seco restoration. $85. Floyd Mercer. My signature, real, authentic, just on the wrong document. Meridian extracted my signature digitally, placed it on a power of attorney form listing Leora Mercer as attorney in fact, with complete authority over my medical care financial decisions and legal matters. Added a forged notary stamp. 2 forged witness signatures, backdated to September 15th, 2023, 2 weeks before Brent confronted me with the red folder. Made it look like I'd signed while still lucid before the alleged cognitive decline. My signature from a 2019 watch repair invoice received payment for Seiko restoration. Floyd Mercer was digitally lifted, pasted onto power of attorney, and used to grant my daughter-in-law legal authority over my life. I charged $85 for that repair. October 25th, 2023. Leora drove to the probate court in Grand Rapids, filed an emergency conservatorship petition. The package she submitted: altered medical report showing stage 3 Parkinson's with cognitive impairment, forged power of attorney with my real signature, sworn affidavit stating Floyd Mercer, age 68, poses danger to self due to cognitive decline and inability to manage basic affairs. Requires immediate conservatorship for his own protection. Statement claiming I had no other family members capable of providing care. And one critical detail buried on page 2 of the filing respondent's current address: 156 Thornwood Drive, Muskegon, Michigan. My son's house, not my lakeside cabin in Leland. The court clerk processed the petition. Stamped it received. Scheduled an emergency hearing for November 5th, 2023, 10 days away. Legal notice was mailed October 26th to 156 Thornwood Drive, where Leora checked the mailbox every day. I was 30 miles away in Leland, repairing a ship's chronometer, drinking cold coffee, completely unaware that the legal system had just been weaponized against me. The notice arrived at Brent's house on October 28th. Leora opened it, read the hearing date, and put it in her locked drawer with Dr. Frost's original honest report. I received no notice. How could I? The address in the court file wasn't mine. Court will hold emergency hearing in 10 days, the notice read. November 5th, 2023, 2 p.m. Respondent Floyd Mercer is entitled to appear and contest this petition. But I couldn't appear at a hearing I didn't know existed. Couldn't contest a petition I'd never seen. Couldn't defend against medical records that had been altered and signatures that had been forged. I stood in my workshop that evening watching the sun set over Lake Michigan, thinking about Virgil returning in 2 more weeks. Thinking I just had to wait a little longer. I didn't know the court date was already set. Didn't know my address in the legal file was wrong. Didn't know that in 11 days a probate judge would declare me incompetent, without me ever setting foot in the courtroom. Court will hold emergency hearing in 10 days. I received no notice. Why address in file is my son's house. I learned about the hearing 1 day before it happened. The woman who knocked on my cabin door November 4th introduced herself as court-appointed guardian, evaluating my competency, and that was the first moment I learned I was being taken to trial the next day. November 4th, 2023, 3 p.m. I was in my workshop repairing a ship's chronometer when I heard the knock. Unexpected. No one drove down that dirt road unless they were lost or looking for me specifically. I opened the door. A woman in her 50s stood on my porch, holding a clipboard and wearing a professional expression I'd seen before, the look of someone doing an unpleasant job efficiently. "Mr. Floyd Mercer," she asked. "Yes. One case. I'm Rebecca Hartwell, court-appointed guardian ad litem. There's an emergency conservatorship hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m. regarding your capacity to manage your affairs. I'm here to conduct a brief evaluation." The words hit like cold water. What hearing? I received no notice. Who filed this? Your daughter-in-law, Mrs. Leora Mercer, citing medical concerns. She consulted her clipboard. "May I come in?" This will take about 30 minutes. 30 minutes to defend my entire life. I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, opened a folder containing what I would later learn was the altered medical report showing stage 3 Parkinson's with cognitive impairment. She asked standard questions. "What's your full address, Mr. Mercer?" 2847 Lakeshore Drive, Leland, Michigan. "And what's today's date?" "November 4th, 2023. Thursday." "Who is the current president?" I answered, correctly. "Can you describe how you manage your daily finances?" "I pay bills on time, balance my checkbook monthly, manage my own bank accounts. Have done so for 60 years without assistance." She wrote notes. Asked about my Parkinson's, did it affect my ability to cook, clean, drive, handle money? I answered everything clearly. Explained my tremor was mild. Stage 1 medication controlled. Showed her my workshop intricate watch repairs requiring steady concentration and fine motor control. She nodded politely, wrote more notes. What I didn't know, she was reading stage 3 cognitive impairment in my file. Every lucid answer I gave she interpreted as compensating, the way early dementia patients can seem normal in short interactions by relying on social scripts and overlearned behaviors. The test was rigged before she knocked on my door. She thanked me after exactly 30 minutes. Said the judge would review her report at tomorrow's hearing. I could attend if I wished. 2 p.m. Probate Court, Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids, 40 miles away. A hearing I'd known about for 30 minutes. "Can I bring a lawyer?" I asked. "You're entitled to representation, yes." I called Virgil's office the moment she left. Still unreachable. Seattle conference extended through November 12th. I answered every question correctly that afternoon. Knew the date, the president, my address, my son's name, how to balance a checkbook. But the test was rigged from the start. My answers didn't matter when the file said stage 3 with cognitive impairment. November 5th, 2023. 2 p.m. Michigan Probate Court, Grand Rapids. I wasn't there. I'd driven to Grand Rapids that morning, but the courthouse was massive and I didn't know which courtroom. By the time I found the right floor, it was 2:40 p.m. The hearing was over. Judge Margaret Clayton had presided. I never met her, never saw her face. But she reviewed my file, the altered medical report, the forged power of attorney Rebecca Hartwell's evaluation, and made her decision. Rebecca Hartwell testified first. Subject answered appropriately during brief assessment. However, medical documentation indicates stage 3 Parkinson's disease with documented cognitive impairment. In my professional opinion, subject demonstrates compensatory behaviors consistent with early decline. I recommend temporary conservatorship pending comprehensive medical evaluation. Leora testified next. Played her role perfectly. Concerned daughter-in-law. Voice trembling with worry. "Your Honor, my father-in-law lives alone in an isolated lakeside cabin. His tremors make daily tasks dangerous. I've seen him drop coffee mugs, struggle with buttons. He refuses family help. We're deeply concerned for his safety. This conservatorship is about protecting him from harm." The judge reviewed the documents. Stage 3 diagnosis. Power of attorney granting Leora medical authority. Guardian's recommendation. Everything appeared legitimate. Based on medical evidence of stage 3 Parkinson's disease with cognitive impairment, Judge Clayton said, and the guardian ad litem's recommendation, this court finds sufficient cause for emergency protective intervention. Gavel struck. I didn't hear it. Emergency temporary conservatorship granted. Leora Mercer appointed conservator for 60 days with full medical and financial authority. Subject to be placed in appropriate care facility for comprehensive evaluation. Full hearing scheduled January 15, 2024. My freedom ended at 2:17 p.m. on November 5, 2023. I was sitting in my truck in the courthouse parking lot, 40 minutes too late, when my life became someone else's to control. November 6th, 9 a.m. Two men knocked on my cabin door. Transport workers with a van and a court order. Us, Mr. Floyd Mercer. We're here to transport you to Lakewood Long-Term Care Center for evaluation under emergency conservatorship order. I read the paper they handed me. Judge Margaret Clayton's signature. Legal authority to transport. This is my home, I said. I'm not going. And sir, we can do this voluntarily, or we can call the sheriff's department for assistance. Your choice. Voluntary admission versus involuntary commitment. The difference is whether you sign your own name or someone signs for you using power of attorney you never granted. I learned the difference that morning. I went voluntarily. What else could I do? 25 miles to Lakewood Care Center in Traverse City. Intake processing, vitals, medication list. Room assignment. Room 12B, second floor. Metal bed frame with thin mattress, plastic chair. Narrow window overlooking the parking lot. Fluorescent lights flickering overhead, casting everything in cold, institutional white. The intake nurse gave me the rules. Conservator is Leora Mercer. All care decisions and external contacts require her approval. That evening, I asked to use the phone. Needed to call Virgil. Needed to call anyone. The staff checked my file. Sir, your healthcare proxy has restricted external communication. We cannot provide phone access without conservator authorization. My son, can I call my son Brent? Family visits require conservator approval. Would you like us to contact Mrs. Mercer to arrange a call? Leora, who would deny it? Who had blocked every channel between me and my son for 2 months? No, I said. I sat on the metal bed in room 12B. Looked at my trembling hands under fluorescent lights. Parking lot gray through the narrow window. I had repaired watches for 45 years. Built a company worth millions. Raised a son alone after my wife died. Door to 12B closed. I sat on metal bed, looked at shaking hands. First time I didn't know what to do next. 3 days later, someone saw what I couldn't. The nurse who walked into room 12B on November 9th was the first person in 2 months who looked at me and saw something the paperwork said wasn't there, a fully functioning mind trapped in a legal cage. Celeste Ramsey, 45. A traveling nurse with tired eyes and a Traverse City accent knocked before entering. Most staff didn't bother. Mr. Mercer. She checked the file on her clipboard. I'm Celeste, covering the day shift this week. I was sitting at the small table by the window, eyes closed, hands moving through the air like I was manipulating something invisible. What are you doing with your hands? She asked. I opened my eyes. Testing the tourbillon mechanism theory. 3-axis rotation compensates for gravity effect on balance wheel in pocket watches. Trying to visualize the gear train without actually building it. She looked at her clipboard, read the file, looked back at me. This file says stage 3 Parkinson's with cognitive impairment. Her voice was careful. Says you can't manage your own affairs. But you just explained a mechanical engineering concept most nurses couldn't understand. The file is wrong, I said. She studied me for a long moment. Said nothing. Made her notes. Left. That night she came back during her break. Quietly closed the door to 12B. Pulled paper and a pen from her pocket. Write down anything you want me to know, she said softly. Who you really are. What really happened. I'll keep it safe. Something about your file doesn't match the man I'm looking at. First person in 67 days who believed me. The next morning she found me in the hallway. There's a payphone on the second floor. State regulations require facilities to allow residents 15 minutes a day for personal calls. Most staff don't mention it. She gave me a handful of quarters. The payphone was near the stairwell. Old, cracked receiver. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. Cold hallway with no windows. I dialed Brent's cell number. Knew it by heart. Didn't ring. Just clicked and went straight to voicemail. His voice from months ago recorded when things were normal. "Hi, you've reached Brent Mercer at Brooks Harbor Construction. Leave a message and I'll return your call." Beep. "Brent, it's Dad," I said. "I'm at Lakewood Care Center in Traverse City, room 12B. This is a mistake. The conservatorship is based on false documents. Please call me back." "Please." Hung up. Stood holding the receiver. Waited 3 days. No call. November 13th. Message number 3. "Brent, those documents Leora showed you were forged. My signature was copied from watch repair invoices. Please verify with Chase bank account 4782-8847. I've never invested in cryptocurrency. You can check this yourself. No call. November 17th. Message number 7. Son, I need you to listen. Just listen. 5 minutes of your time. That's all I'm asking. I raised you for 30 years. I deserve 5 minutes. No call. 20 calls. I left 20 messages for my son over 4 weeks. Patient at first, then urgent, then angry, then exhausted. I didn't know he wasn't hearing any of them. I thought I was being ignored. The truth was worse. I was shouting into a void Leora had carefully constructed, and my son had no idea I was trapped behind it. November 20th, message 10. My voice harder now. "Brent, you owe me the basic respect of listening. I raised you alone. Your mother died when you were 6. I worked 3 jobs to keep you fed. I taught you to build, to measure, to stand on your own. And now you won't even pick up the phone." November 24th. Message 13. Thanksgiving. I spent it in room 12B eating cafeteria turkey. 2. Happy Thanksgiving, son. I'm thankful you're healthy and successful. I'm thankful I got to raise you, even if you don't remember any of it right now. Call me when you can. November 27th. Message 15. Voice exhausted. Son, I don't know if you're getting these. I don't know if you care, but I'm still your father. Please. November 30th. Message 17. Brent, it's Dad. Call me. How many times can you tell someone you love them before you stop believing they'll hear it? I learned the answer is 20. That's when you stop hoping for response and just speak the truth anyway. December 5th, 2023. Cold morning. Fluorescent lights flickering in the second-floor hallway. I stood at the payphone with the cracked receiver in my trembling hand. Call number 20. I dialed. Waited for his voicemail greeting. Heard his voice. Beep. I opened my mouth. Realized I'd said everything already. Patient explanations. Urgent pleas. Angry accusations. Desperate begging. Thanksgiving wishes. Simple requests. 20 messages. What words were left? Just the truth. Brent, I said, voice barely above a whisper. It's Dad. I love you. That's all. I hung up. Stood there holding the receiver, hand shaking. Fluorescent hum, the only sound. Then I tried one more thing. Called his office number at Brooks Harbor Construction. The landline, not his cell. Different number. Maybe it would ring through. Automated voice. We're sorry. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. I tried directory assistance. Brooks Harbor Construction, Muskegon, Michigan. I'm sorry, sir. No listing found under that name. I stood in that hallway for 10 minutes after hanging up. Cold, fluorescent lights. Cracked receiver still in my hand. Understanding finally hit. She'd changed the numbers. Redirected his cell to auto voicemail. Changed the business phone. Made sure every channel went to a dead end. I wasn't being ignored. I was calling numbers that no longer connected to my son. 20 messages sitting in a voicemail box Brent never checked because Leora had intercepted the notification system. For 4 weeks, I'd been shouting at a wall of engineered silence while my son went about his life believing I'd abandoned him. I found Celeste during her shift that evening. 20 calls, I told her. 20 messages. He never heard a single one. She changed his numbers, redirected everything. I thought I was being ignored. The truth is worse, I was shouting into nothing. Celeste wrote it down, added it to the papers she was keeping hidden. That night alone in room 12B, I sat on the metal bed, looking at my shaking hands. Message 20. I stood in cold hallway, shaking hand-holding receiver, said the last 3 words I had strength to say. 2 days after that final call, I learned there were worse ways to silence someone than cutting their phone lines. My prescription wasn't ready at the medication window December 7th, and that's when I realized Leora could control more than my communication. She could control my body. Morning medication distribution. 8 a.m. I stood at the window on the first floor where Lakewood's staff dispensed pills from locked carts. The nurse checked her computer. Mr. Mercer, your Parkinson's prescription wasn't renewed. I don't have anything for you today. That's a mistake, I said. I've been on carbidopa-levodopa for 8 months. Same dosage. It should auto-renew. She clicked through screens. Healthcare Proxy has to authorize all prescription renewals for conservatorship patients. Your proxy didn't approve it. Who's my healthcare proxy, slut? She checked the file. Leora Mercer, of course. I need that medication, I said, keeping my voice level. Without it, my symptoms worsen significantly. I need to speak with Dr. Frost, my neurologist. I can submit a request for physician consultation. It'll take a few days to schedule. Just a few days. My hand was already trembling more than usual. I need that prescription today. Sir, I can't override the healthcare proxy. You'll have to discuss it with Mrs. Mercer, the woman who'd engineered my imprisonment, who'd blocked my calls to my son, who'd forged documents and stolen my freedom. That woman now controlled whether I received medication that kept my nervous system functional. I walked back to room 12B, tried to stay calm, tried to think strategically. By noon, I could feel the difference. Carbidopa-levodopa regulates dopamine in the brain. Without it, Parkinson's symptoms emerge unchecked. The tremor in my right hand, usually mild, barely noticeable, started getting worse. By 2 p.m., both hands were shaking visibly. The resting tremor became constant. Muscle rigidity set in by 3 p.m. My shoulders stiffened. Movement became painful. Walking from my bed to the bathroom felt like moving through mud. Bradykinesia. That's the medical term for slowed movement. Every action took twice as long. Buttoning a shirt, lifting a glass of water, turning my head. My body stopped obeying commands at normal speed. I tried to hide it. Kept my hands in my pockets when staff walked by. Moved deliberately so the slowness looked intentional rather than symptomatic. But I couldn't hide it completely. Other residents noticed. Staff noticed. The man in room 12B was getting worse. Exactly what Leora needed them to see. By 5 p.m., I was sitting in my room, trying to write a note to Celeste about what was happening. My handwriting, already shaky from the tremor, had deteriorated to barely legible scrawl. I knew what was happening physiologically. Knew the dopamine depletion was causing motor control breakdown. Knew this was withdrawal from necessary medication, but knowing didn't help. My body was betraying me whether I understood the mechanism or not. Celeste found me in the hallway around 6 p.m. I was walking back from the common room, moving slowly, one hand on the wall for balance. She stopped, watched me take 3 steps. Her professional assessment was immediate. "You're off your meds," she said quietly. I nodded. "How long?" "Since this morning. Healthcare Proxy didn't renew the prescription." Her face went hard. Not angry at me. Angry for me. "That's medical abuse," she said. Not loud. Just factual. a nurse recognizing what she was seeing. Deliberately withholding necessary medication to make someone appear more impaired than they are. "Can you prove intent?" I asked. "No, but I can see what's happening." She helped me back to room 12B, told me to rest, said she'd be back during evening rounds. She returned at 8 p.m., closed the door quietly, pulled 4 tablets from her pocket. "Hakatu, carbidopa levodopa," she said. "My emergency supply. I keep them for patients who miss doses during shift changes. This is illegal medication diversion. I could lose my license, but I can't watch this happen." 4 tablets in her palm, small, round, yellow. "Take one now," she said. "Hide the rest. They won't be enough for proper management, but they'll reduce symptoms." I took one immediately with water from the plastic cup beside my bed. Swallowed it. Felt the chalky texture going down. "Thank you," I said. Don't thank me. This is temporary. 4 pills will last maybe 2 days if you ration them carefully. Then you'll be back where you started." She left quietly. I sat on the metal bed holding the remaining 3 pills. 90 minutes later, I felt the medication start working. The tremor in my hands reduced. Not gone, just less severe. The muscle rigidity eased slightly. Movement became incrementally easier, but the relief came with understanding. 4 pills. 2 days of partial symptom management. Then I'd deteriorate again. Probably worse than before because withdrawal symptoms compound. I understood Leora's strategy now, crystal clear. She wasn't trying to kill me. She was trying to make me look incompetent. Control my medication, control my visible symptoms. Let the tremors worsen. Let the rigidity slow my movement. Let the bradykinesia make me appear confused and struggling. Then parade me in front of the court at the January hearing and say, "Look at him. Stage 3 Parkinson's with declining capacity. He can barely walk. Needs permanent conservatorship." My deteriorating body would be her most convincing evidence. Midnight. I sat alone in room 12B, fluorescent lights humming, parking lot dark through the narrow window. One of Celeste's pills working in my system providing temporary relief I knew wouldn't last. I looked at my hands. Even with the medication, the tremor was worse than it had been 3 weeks ago. Because I'd been without proper management for a full day. Because stress and isolation make Parkinson's symptoms worse. Because my body was being weaponized whether I consented or not. If this continued, if Leora kept blocking prescriptions, I'd appear in court shaking, slow, struggling with basic movement. The judge would look at me and see exactly what the forged medical file claimed, advanced Parkinson's with declining capacity. No one would believe I could manage my own affairs when I couldn't hold a pen steady. I looked at my hand, shaking more than usual. Thought this is exactly what she wants everyone to see. I pressed the call button at 2:30 a.m. and waited in the dark for someone who never came. The tremor had worsened through the evening, my right hand shaking so badly I'd knocked over a water glass trying to reach my medication. The pills scattered across the floor beside my bed, small white circles I couldn't retrieve without help. I'd pressed the button and waited. 5 minutes. 10. The red light above my door stayed dark. At 15 minutes, I pressed it again, held it down for a full 10 seconds. Nothing. The night shift knew I was here. They'd done their last check at midnight, barely glancing in before moving on. I thought about calling out, but my room sat at the end of the hall, farthest from the nurse's station. Leora had requested this room specifically. Good for privacy, she'd told the staff. Good for keeping me isolated, I understood now. The medication sat just out of reach. Without it, the tremors would get worse. I'd seen this pattern before in other Parkinson's patients, the cascading effect, when doses were missed. I had maybe an hour before my hands became completely unreliable. I swung my legs off the bed and stood carefully. The cold floor shocked through thin socks. Lakewood kept the heating low at night, cost savings probably. I shuffled toward the bathroom, using the wall for support. Just needed water to take the pills I could still reach in my jacket pocket. Backup supply I'd hidden from the staff from Leora. The hallway stretched dim and empty. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, half of them dark. I moved slowly, trailing my left hand along the wall. The bathroom door stood open 20 feet away. Almost there. Then my foot hit something slick. For one suspended moment, I felt weightless, the floor rushing up to meet me. I tried to catch myself, but my hands wouldn't cooperate. The tremor made them useless. I landed hard on my left side, heard something crack in my ribs. The pain came sharp and immediate, stealing my breath. I lay there on the cold linoleum, staring at the ceiling tiles. One had a water stain shaped like Africa. I focused on breathing. Shallow, deep breaths sent lightning through my chest. The floor beneath me was wet. Someone had mopped and not put out warning signs. Or maybe the signs were there, and I hadn't seen them in the dim light. Footsteps eventually. A night attendant I didn't recognize found me at 3:17 a.m. I could see the wall clock from where I lay. She called for help, and suddenly there were people everywhere asking questions. I answered through gritted teeth. Yes, I'd fallen. No, I didn't lose consciousness. Yes, the pain was severe. Leora arrived at the hospital before the ambulance did. Somehow she'd been notified first. She rode with me to County General, holding my hand, making worried sounds. Playing the devoted stepdaughter for the paramedics. He's been declining rapidly, she told them. The tremors, the confusion. I've been so worried about falls. I wanted to tell them about the disconnected call button, the ignored signals, the deliberate isolation. But pain made thinking difficult, and Leora's grip on my hand tightened every time I opened my mouth. The ER at County General hummed with late-night chaos. They wheeled me into a bay and left me there, Leora hovering close. A nurse took vitals. A resident ordered x-rays. Leora stayed beside my gurney, scrolling through her phone, occasionally touching my arm with practiced concern. Then Dr. Alan Porter arrived. He was maybe mid-40s, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that actually looked at patients instead of through them. He introduced himself, asked Leora to wait outside while he examined me, and something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. She hesitated, first time I'd seen her caught off guard. I should stay. I'm his medical proxy. I need to examine the patient privately, Dr. Porter said. Standard protocol for trauma assessments. After she left, he checked my ribs gently, then pulled a chair close to my gurney. Mr. Brooks, I'm going to ask you some questions. Take your time answering. He didn't ask about the fall. He asked about bruises. I didn't know I had finger mark patterns on my upper arms. He asked about my medication schedule, who controlled it, how often I saw my regular doctor. He asked if I felt safe at Lakewood. I looked at this stranger with kind eyes and realized he knew. Somehow he knew. The call button didn't work, I said finally. I waited 15 minutes. It never works when I need it. Dr. Porter nodded slowly. How long have you been at Lakewood? 3 months, since September. And before that, I lived in my own house. I ran a company worth $186 million. The number felt important suddenly. My stepdaughter has power of attorney now. Something shifted in Dr. Porter's expression. Not surprise, but confirmation. He made notes in his tablet, then excused himself. Through the curtain, I heard him speaking to someone in low tones, words like pattern and social services and documentation. They kept me in ER 18 hours. Broken ribs, severe bruising, dehydration they wanted to monitor. Leora came and went, increasingly agitated each time. Dr. Porter had filed something, I didn't know what, but I saw her on her phone, voice tight with anger she barely controlled. Late afternoon, a woman in business casual appeared at my bedside. Nancy Coleman, Social Services. She asked careful questions, took photographs of my bruises, made more notes. Before she left, she leaned close. Mr. Brooks, we've located contact information for someone named Virgil Townsend, your attorney according to Lakewood's old admission files. Would you like us to call him? I hadn't heard Virgil's name in 3 months. Leora had cut off all my outside contacts. No phone calls, no visitors, no mail that wasn't pre-screened. But somehow buried in paperwork, she couldn't fully control his number, survived. Yes, I said. Please. Virgil Townsend walked into the visiting room and stopped 10 feet from my chair, silent for 10 seconds. I watched him take in the details: institutional gray sweatshirt, bruising on my arms, the tremor in my right hand. Virgil was 65, my maritime lawyer for 30 years, the man who'd structured every major Brooks maritime acquisition since 1995. Sharp mind, sharper instincts. He'd never seen me like this. Floyd. His voice came out rough. Jesus Christ. I gestured to the chair. The visiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Afternoon light came through reinforced windows. It's worse than the social worker said. Sit down. He sat, pulled out a legal pad, and listened while I explained everything. The forged neurologist report. The conservatorship filed while I was sedated. Leora's systematic isolation cut phone access, screened visitors, controlled medication. Financial transfers totaling at least $30 million from $186 million in assets. When I finished, Virgil set down his pen. Do you want to sue her? The question hung in the air. Outside, a television played canned laughter through thin walls. I could feel Virgil waiting for the obvious answer. Yes, immediately, emergency motions, criminal charges. Not yet, I said. His eyebrows rose. Floyd, I want evidence first. Real evidence. Documented patterns. I kept my voice level, the same tone from boardrooms when executives pushed for quick decisions over smart ones. If we move now, she'll destroy records, claim medical necessity, hide behind the conservatorship. Her lawyer will say I'm confused, being manipulated. How long are you willing to wait? Long enough she has no way out. I explained the strategy like a corporate acquisition. Let Leora keep operating. Let her transfer more funds, forge more documents, commit more documentable acts. Meanwhile, build an airtight case, medical experts, proving I never needed conservatorship, financial forensics tracking, every dollar, witness statements about medication denial. When we moved, she'd face criminal charges with no plea bargain leverage. I want her buried in evidence, I said, not escaping on technicalities. Virgil leaned back, something shifting in his expression. You're still thinking like a chairman. He meant it as observation, not criticism. 30 years together, he knew how I operated. Patient, strategic, willing to endure short-term pain for long-term victory. I need someone who can trace the money, I told him. Digital forensics shell companies, someone I trust completely. Your nephew Merritt, Virgil said. He's 30 now, forensic investigator in Chicago specializing in financial fraud. He's been asking about you. Leora told him you didn't want visitors. Of course she had. 2 days later, Merritt Lockwood sat across from me, recording equipment on the table. He had his mother's eyes, my late sister Catherine's sharp intelligence, but his own methodical precision. Laptop, legal documents, 6 hours of questions. I need exact dates for every transfer you remember, he said, fingers on keyboard. Did Leora mention specific banks or document services? Any names, locations, account numbers? I gave him everything, dates, amounts, overheard phone conversations, broker names. Merritt took notes with quiet intensity, occasionally asking questions, building a timeline. Professional, thorough, angry underneath, but channeling it productively. This will take time, he said. But we'll find the trail. He found it in 2 weeks. Merritt called Virgil on a Wednesday in late December. Virgil put him on speakerphone in the Lakewood administrator's office. I'd been granted supervised phone privileges after the ER incident. Merritt's voice came through tinny but clear. Found the money trail. Funds moved from Brooks Maritime through 3 Shell LLCs, then wire transfers to Meridian Document Services in Indianapolis. They received $80,000 from Leora's accounts over 6 months. The document services, Virgil repeated. For what? Forged medical records, conservatorship papers, power of attorney, everything Leora needed to make this look legitimate. Merritt paused. Virgil, it gets bigger. The FBI is already watching Meridian. They're suspected of running a forgery network targeting elderly, high-net-worth individuals across the Midwest. The room went quiet. I heard my heartbeat, fluorescent lights humming a distant meal cart. Before I tell you what Merritt said next, comment. A, if you think Leora acted alone, or B, if you think someone helped her, add one reason in 5 to 10 words. Please note, the next part includes some fictionalized details added to deepen the emotional impact. The message is what matters, Merritt continued. Floyd, you aren't the first victim of this network. The FBI is investigating at least 6 other cases, similar patterns, elderly victims with substantial assets forged, documentation rushed, conservatorships. But none of those victims have the resources or documentation to cooperate with federal investigators. Most are too isolated, too medically compromised, or their families won't pursue it. I gripped the desk edge, felt cold metal under my palm. What are you saying? You're the first with resources to fight back, Merritt said. The first who can help dismantle the entire operation. The FBI will want to talk to you. This isn't just about recovering your money anymore. This is about stopping a criminal network that's been preying on vulnerable people for years. Virgil looked at me, waiting. I thought about those 6 other victims. Elderly, isolated, trapped like I'd been trapped. Families who'd trusted the wrong person, signed the wrong papers. Leora hadn't invented this scheme. She'd found it. Found professionals who sold fraud as a service infrastructure designed to exploit the elderly and make it look legal. And I was the first one positioned to tear it down. Set up the FBI meeting, I said. Tell them I'll cooperate fully. I want every document, every transaction, every piece of evidence we can provide, not just to save myself, to stop this from happening to anyone else. Celeste photographed the shift log at 11:37 p.m. screen light, reflected in the medication room glass. I learned about it 3 days later when she slipped into my room during evening rounds, closed the door softly behind her. The FBI meeting was scheduled for next week. Virgil had set it up. Merritt was flying in from Chicago, but we still needed institutional documentation. Evidence from inside Lakewood proving the medication, denials, the ignored call buttons, the systematic isolation. Celeste had decided to get it herself. I've been working late shifts, she said quietly, checking the hallway through my door's window. Medical records room empties out after 10. No cameras inside, just the hallway. She showed me her phone. Photo after photo, each one time-stamped and geotagged. Shift logs from the night of my fall showing my call button pressed at 2:30 a.m., acknowledged on the system at 2:47 a.m., 17 minutes, with no response. Original prescription orders for my carbidopa-levodopa showing proper dosing, then subsequent cancellation forms, signed with Leora's medical proxy authorization. Facility incident reports with timestamps that didn't match the actual events, altered after the fact. 3 nights, Celeste said. I've been documenting for 3 nights. I stared at the images. She'd captured everything the paper trail Leora thought was safely buried in Lakewood's filing system the digital records staff assumed no one questioned. Each photograph was clear, legible, prosecutable. "You could lose your license," I said. She met my eyes. "You could lose your life. Already lost your freedom." "I know what I'm seeing here, Floyd. This isn't just negligence, this is deliberate harm documented in our own records. Someone needs to prove it." She'd also photographed security camera screenshots showing the hallway floor wet and slick. The night I fell, no warning signs visible. Comparison shots of medical record entries, the original handwritten notes versus the later typed versions in the digital system, with subtle changes that shifted meaning. Medication count logs showing doses marked as administered, when I knew I'd received nothing. Over 3 nights, she'd built a case. On the 4th night, Celeste brought a USB drive. She pressed it into my palm, her fingers cold against mine. "Encrypted copies already sent to Virgil Townsend's office," she said. "If Lakewood fires me or anything happens, the evidence survives. Nothing will happen to you," I said. I meant it to sound reassuring. Instead, it came out like a promise I couldn't keep. "Floyd, I know what I'm doing." She squeezed my hand once, then left before anyone noticed how long she'd stayed. I held that USB drive after she left, feeling its weight. Light thing. Heavy consequences. Celeste had risked everything to document what Lakewood did to me. What they let Leora do. The least I could do was make sure it counted. 2 days later, something else broke open. Dr. Simone Frost sat in her neurology office in Grand Rapids, reading through a court subpoena. She was 52, the neurologist who diagnosed my Parkinson's 14 months earlier, careful, methodical, the kind of doctor who took time to explain test results and answer questions. The subpoena requested supplemental medical records for a conservatorship case, Floyd Mercer. She pulled my file standard procedure. Court wanted certified copies of diagnosis reports, treatment recommendations, cognitive assessments, routine legal compliance. She opened the digital file to prepare the documents. Then she read her own conclusion: Stage 3 Parkinson's with significant cognitive impairment, requiring supervised living arrangement and medical proxy decision-making. Dr. Frost stopped. That wasn't what she'd diagnosed. She pulled her handwritten examination notes from 14 months ago. Stage 1, possibly early. Stage 2, Parkinson's. Mild tremor, some rigidity, fully responsive to medication. Cognitive function, entirely normal. She'd administered a complete Montreal cognitive assessment. Floyd Mercer scored 28 out of 30. No impairment. No need for supervised living. She looked back at the PDF report bearing her signature and letterhead. Same patient. Same date. Completely different conclusion. Her hands went cold. She checked the document properties, something she'd learned to do after a billing fraud case years ago. The PDF showed creation date matching her original report. But the last modified date was 3 days later, 3 days after she'd signed and sent it to my primary care physician, modified from an account she didn't recognize. Dr. Frost picked up her phone, called her IT department. "I need forensic analysis on a document. Medical record that's been altered after I signed it. I need to know who modified it, when, and from where." The IT specialist called back 2 hours later. The metadata trail was clear. Document accessed and modified from an IP address registered to a computer belonging to Leora Mercer. Patient's stepdaughter. Medical proxy. The person who'd requested the conservatorship. Dr. Frost sat very still, staring at her computer screen. Someone had taken her medical assessment, changed her diagnosis to justify institutionalization, and used it to strip a competent man of his legal rights. Used her name, her signature, her professional credibility. Medical fraud, federal crime, digital fingerprints leading straight to the perpetrator. She called Virgil Townsend's office immediately. Virgil took that call at 8 p.m. He called me back 5 minutes later. I heard it in his voice before he said anything, the shift from strategy to certainty, from building a case to having one. "Floyd," he said, "we have something she can't explain." I sat on the edge of my bed, at Lakewood phone pressed to my ear, listening, while Virgil explained. Dr. Frost's altered report. The metadata trail showing exactly when it was changed from exactly whose computer, with exactly what modifications. Irrefutable digital evidence of medical document forgery. "This isn't just civil fraud anymore," Virgil said. "This is federal medical record tampering, criminal charges, prison time, and we can prove every detail." I thought about Celeste's USB drive hidden in my jacket pocket. Thought about Merritt's financial forensics tracing money through shell companies. Thought about Dr. Frost's fury at having her professional integrity violated. Thought about 6 other elderly victims of the same network waiting for someone to fight back. The evidence was mounting, piece by careful piece. Soon there would be enough. Soon there would be no escape. "When do we move?" I asked. Virgil's voice was steady. "Soon, Floyd, very soon." Leora walked into the visiting room at 3 p.m., and I let my hand shake worse than it actually was. Virgil had called the night before with news about Dr. Frost's altered report digital fingerprints, proving federal medical fraud. The evidence was mounting daily: Celeste's institutional documentation, Merritt's financial forensics, now irrefutable proof of forgery. But we weren't ready to move yet. One more piece needed positioning. So I sat slumped in the wheelchair, watching Leora arrange store-bought flowers in a plastic vase, performing concern for the 2 staff members who'd wheeled me in. "How is he eating?" she asked, the aide voice pitched loud like I was deaf rather than supposedly confused. "Some days better than others," the aide said. Leora touched my shoulder with practiced tenderness. "Does he recognize visitors?" "Hard to say." She pulled a chair close, sat facing me. This was her 3rd visit since the conservatorship was granted bi-weekly schedule maintained to look appropriate. Each time she performed the same routine: concerned daughter-in-law, caring for declining elderly man, doing everything she could. "Floyd, it's Leora. I brought you flowers." I looked at her slowly, let my eyes take time to focus. Let the tremor in my right hand run unchecked the shake I'd spent weeks learning to control with medication she'd been denying. Made my posture collapse further into the wheelchair. "Flowers," I repeated, voice slow and flat. "Yes, they're for your room, to brighten things up." She glanced at the staff members who were trying to look busy near the door. "Do you remember the company Floyd Brooks Maritime?" I paused for a long moment, staring past her shoulder. "I don't." "The boats." The tremor worsened. I let my head droop forward. "It's okay." Leora patted my hand. "You don't need to worry about that anymore. Everything's being taken care of." I mumbled something incoherent. She smiled, small, satisfied expression she thought I couldn't interpret. She was watching me deteriorate faster than expected. Good. That's exactly what I needed her to believe. She stayed 20 minutes asking simple questions I answered poorly, speaking about weather and meals and nothing important. When she finally stood to leave, her confidence was visible in the way she moved, relaxed, certain already mentally spending money she thought was secured. I remained slumped until she left the room. In the hallway outside, Leora's voice carried through the open door. She was speaking to someone, probably her driver or assistant, waiting by the entrance. Celeste stood at the nearby nurse's station, restocking medication cart supplies, phone positioned on the counter recording audio. "Declining fast," Leora said. "Won't make it through the year." She said it like reading a weather report. "Clinical." "Pleased," a male voice responded. "Then the house goes on market." "Seen everything goes on market. 60 million in real estate alone." Brooks Maritime sells to Brooks Harbor Construction, that deal's already drafted. Then liquidate remaining assets, pay down the care facility costs, close the estate. They walked away down the corridor, voices fading. Celeste stopped. The recording glanced toward the visiting room where I sat. Our eyes met briefly. She nodded once, slipped her phone into her pocket, and continued working. I waited until staff wheeled me back to room 12B before letting my posture straighten. 8 p.m. Celeste returned carrying a standard supply bag, linens, towels, toiletries visible on top. She closed the door, pulled a laptop and small webcam from beneath the towels, set them on my bedside table. Added a wireless earpiece. 20 minutes maximum, she said quietly, positioning the camera to frame my face and the wall behind me. Board knows to keep cameras off until you're ready. Connections encrypted, VPN routed through Virgil's office. I sat up straight, rolled my shoulders back, tested the tremor control. Medication was working properly. Now Celeste had been administering correct doses for 2 weeks, smuggled past other staff. The shake was minimal, manageable. Let's show them who their chairman still is, I said. Celeste opened the laptop, entered a password, and the screen lit up with a video conference interface. 6 faces appeared in separate windows. Brooks Maritime CEO and 5 board members, all sitting in their Grand Rapids offices or home studies, all looking at their screens with expressions ranging from concern to curiosity. Mr. Chairman, the CEO said, "We're waiting." First time anyone had called me that in 4 months. The title settled over me like something I'd forgotten I was wearing. I looked at those 6 faces, people I'd hired, promoted, trusted, with running a company worth $186 million. People who'd been told their chairman was incompetent, unable to make decisions, probably dying. "I'm going to give you 3 directives," I said. Voice clear, no slurring, no confusion. First, no one reveals this contact occurred. Maintain the appearance that I'm incompetent and incommunicado. Anyone asks about my condition, you know nothing beyond what you've been officially told. The CEO nodded. Others followed. Second, track all external asset access requests. Flag anything from Leora Mercer or Brooks Harbor Construction immediately. Don't deny, just delay. Route everything through legal review request, additional documentation, slow the process down. Understood, the CFO said. Third, if anyone approaches claiming proxy authority to make major decisions, move all significant actions to chairman desk approval. Which means nothing happens without my explicit authorization Leora can't provide because she thinks I'm incoherent. I watched them process this. Watched them understand that their chairman had been imprisoned, stripped of legal rights, isolated from his own company, and was conducting a strategic counterattack from a nursing home room with a smuggled laptop. "You're really doing this?" the CEO said. Not a question. "Doing what?" "Fighting back from inside. I built this company for 30 years, I told him. "I'm not handing it to someone who forged medical records and bribed document services to steal it. Hold the line until legal proceedings begin. That's all I'm asking." The board members exchanged glances on screen. "Understood, Mr. Chairman," the CEO said finally. "We'll hold the line." We spent the next 90 minutes going through details, which accounts to monitor which contracts to delay, how to handle Brooks Harbor Construction if they approached about acquisition. Every directive designed to protect assets while maintaining the illusion I was too incompetent to be involved. The screen turned off at 11 p.m. Celeste took the laptop, silently packed it beneath fresh linens in the supply bag, removed the webcam and earpiece. Within 3 minutes, no evidence remained that anything unusual had occurred. I settled back into bed, let my posture slump again, practiced the tremor. Leora thought I was dying, thought her victory was guaranteed. Thought the company would be hers within months. I just placed the final chess piece. Brooks Maritime was secured. Evidence was compiled, federal investigators were ready to move. Now we just needed her to make one more mistake. Brent Mercer watched a YouTube video on elder financial abuse at 11 p.m., and something in his chest went cold. I didn't know this was happening. Wouldn't learn about it until weeks later when he finally told me. But understanding what my son went through that night matters because it explains why he made the choices he did and didn't in the days that followed. Brent was 40, owner of Brooks Harbor Construction, married to Leora for 3 years. We hadn't spoken in 4 years before my disappearance complicated history, old wounds neither of us knew how to address. He'd built his business without my help, kept his distance from Brooks Maritime, constructed a life separate from mine. When Leora told him about a conservatorship case, she was handling a nursing home patient whose family needed asset liquidation help. He'd believed her. Why wouldn't he? But that night alone in his office finishing paperwork, he'd clicked on a legal compliance video. Elder financial abuse warning signs for construction contractors involved in estate asset sales. The list played on screen: sudden isolation, from family rushed conservatorship filings, healthcare proxy misuse, urgent property liquidations, cognitive decline, claims without proper medical documentation. Each point matched what Leora had described about her case. The patient at Lakewood, the medical necessity, the asset transfers. Coincidence felt thin. Brent went home. Couldn't sleep. At 1 a.m., he opened his laptop, sat on the edge of his bed, and typed into Google N.W. Brooks Maritime, Michigan. First result: Brooks Maritime Holdings Chairman, Inauguration 2008. He clicked. The article loaded with a photograph: man in dark suit shaking hands with Michigan's governor at a harbor ceremony. He zoomed in on the face. Recognition hit like cold water. His father. 18 years younger in the photo, but unmistakable. The article continued: N.W. Brooks Chairman, Brooks Maritime Holdings, privately held maritime company valued at $186 million, headquartered Grand Rapids. Brent closed the laptop, sat in darkness, opened it again. He searched Floyd Brooks Maritime 2023. Found news brief from May. Brooks Maritime Chairman whereabouts unknown since March. Company continues operations under board governance. Family unavailable for comment. Disappeared March 2023. Leora's conservatorship case started April 2023. The nursing home patient she'd been liquidating assets for. The one she said wouldn't make it through the year. Brent's hands shook on the keyboard. He didn't call me. Didn't drive to Lakewood. Didn't confront Leora that night or the next morning. Not brave enough yet, or maybe not ready to face what knowing meant. Instead, he drove to an electronics store the following day, bought a small voice recorder and began secretly documenting. He recorded Leora's phone calls when she thought he wasn't listening. Her discussions about the patient facility complaints, asset transfer timelines. He saved text message screenshots. He gathered evidence while avoiding the man at the center of it. Cowardice disguised as caution. He knew, and he still didn't visit. I learned this later and understood it. Fear makes cowards of good people sometimes. The question isn't whether you're afraid, it's what you do after fear subsides. While Brent was discovering his father was alive and imprisoned, Merritt was making discoveries of his own. He sat in Virgil's Grand Rapids office on a Thursday afternoon in late December, spreading documents across the conference table. Financial forensics from 2 other cases, an Ohio widow in 2021, a Michigan widower in 2022. Both elderly, both high net worth. Both ended up in conservatorships with forged medical documentation. Both had assets liquidated through rushed estate sales. Both died within 18 months. Same forgery signature on the medical documents. Merritt said, pointing to metadata reports. Not identical, professionally varied, but same digital tools, same modification patterns, same Meridian document services payment records in the financial trails. Virgil studied the documents. Neither case was prosecuted. Victims didn't survive long enough. Families were too fractured or too complicit to pursue it. The pattern was invisible until you looked across cases. Merritt pulled up another file on his laptop. This is an operational network, not isolated crimes. Meridian has been doing this for at least 3 years that I can trace. Probably longer. How many victims? FBI thinks 6 minimum. Possibly more they haven't identified yet. Virgil's head came up. FBI. I contacted Detroit field office 2 days ago. Sent them everything we'd compiled on Meridian, the financial forensics, Dr. Frost's metadata trail, institutional evidence from Lakewood. They've been building a case against Meridian for 18 months, but lacked a cooperating victim. Living victims who could testify, provide documentation, survive through prosecution. The pieces were shifting. My personal case, my stolen company, my false imprisonment, my forged medical records was becoming something larger. Virgil called me that evening. I sat in room 12B, phone pressed to my ear, listening to him explain what Merritt had found. The other victims. The established pattern. The FBI investigation that had been running parallel to our evidence gathering, waiting for someone who could help them take down the entire network. Sakintil, they want to meet you, Virgil said. Not as a victim filing a family fraud complaint, as a cooperating witness in a federal elder abuse prosecution. You'd be testifying not just against Leora, but against Meridian Document Services and everyone involved in the operation. I watched the winter darkness through my window. Thought about the Ohio widow who died before anyone prosecuted her abusers. The Michigan widower whose family never sought justice. 6 other victims, maybe more, who'd been isolated and exploited and forgotten. Thought about Leora thinking I'd be dead before the year ended. Thought about the criminal infrastructure that sold fraud as a service to people willing to steal from their own families. This becomes federal, Virgil continued. Once you agree to cooperate, the FBI takes over coordination. They'll want everything: your testimony, medical records, financial documentation, institutional evidence. They'll build a case that targets the entire network. But Floyd, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. This won't be quiet family litigation settled out of court. This will be public. Federal charges, criminal trial, national attention on elder abuse infrastructure. Your story becomes the case study that brings down the network. He paused. I heard him shift in his chair. Floyd, are you ready after this step? No turning back. I thought about 6 other victims. Thought about how many more there might be if no one stopped this. Thought about Celeste risking her career to document the truth. Thought about Merritt spending weeks tracing money through shell companies. Thought about Dr. Frost's fury at having her professional integrity violated. Thought about the chairman I'd been for 30 years, the one who made hard decisions, who took responsibility, who protected people. Yes, I said. I'm ready. They pulled me out of Lakewood at 9 a.m. under court order for a mandatory health evaluation that didn't exist. 3 days after agreeing to cooperate, 2 federal marshals arrived with official paperwork. The administrator verified signatures, made copies. Floyd Mercer, mandatory independent health assessment, per conservatorship review, immediate transport required. Lakewood staff complied. They wheeled me to an unmarked sedan engine running in cold December air. Virgil sat in the back seat. Where are we actually going? I asked once we'd pulled away. FBI Detroit field office. Virgil said quietly. Health evaluation is cover. Federal court order issued yesterday under seal. Leora will hear about the transport this afternoon, but only what Lakewood was told. 90 minutes north through Michigan winter. Bare trees, gray sky roads I'd traveled decades running Brooks Maritime. My tremor was controlled. Today Celeste had been administering proper medication for 3 weeks now. FBI Detroit field office downtown. Security checkpoints, federal seals, private entrance. 4th floor conference room, soundproof, windowless. Special Agent Marcus Hale stood when we entered. Mid-40s compact build competence rather than intimidation. FBI badge on his belt. 2 other agents flanked him. Merritt already seated with laptops and file boxes. Mr. Brooks. Hale's handshake was firm, careful of my tremor. Thank you for agreeing to meet. We've been building this case since March 2022. Your nephew's forensics gave us the connection we needed. I sat across from federal agents who'd been tracking the network that destroyed my life. We'd been investigating Meridian Document Services 18 months, Hale continued. Suspicious financial patterns, forged medical documents, estate fraud complaints that never became prosecutable. We lacked a cooperating victim with documentation, until Merritt contacted us 2 weeks ago. He clicked a remote. Screen behind him lit up photographs, names, dates, connecting lines across the Midwest. 4 confirmed victims. Ohio widow, March 2021, 83 assets liquidated through conservatorship. Died June 2022 before family questioned documentation. Michigan widower, September 2022, 76, similar pattern deceased, March 2023. Indiana woman, February 2023, 71, currently institutionalized, cognitive decline, too advanced for testimony. And you, Mr. Brooks. April 2023, conservatorship, currently institutionalized, but mentally competent. I stared at those photographs. Elderly faces trapped the same way. 2 dead, 1 too damaged, and me. You're the only one who can testify, Hale said. Only victim still competent, still alive with resources and documentation for federal prosecution. Merritt opened his laptop. Financial forensics, showing $2.4 million transferred from your accounts. Institutional negligence documentation from Celeste Ramsey. Dr. Frost's forged report with metadata proving alteration from Leora's computer. Lakewood incident reports with modified timestamps. Digital trail links Leora's IP directly to Meridian servers on 6 occasions. Wire transfer records, another agent added. $80,000 from Leora to Meridian over 6 months. Payment for medical forgery, legal filing assistance, conservatorship consulting. Hale pulled up another screen. Federal charges against Leora Mercer, wire fraud, Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, maximum 20 years. Aggravated identity theft, Title 18, Section 1028, a mandatory 2 years consecutive. Falsifying medical records, Michigan State felony, 5 years. Elder abuse under Michigan Law 750.145N, up to 20 years. He looked at me directly. 40 years minimum if convicted on all counts. This isn't civil litigation. This is federal prosecution with prison time. Meridian Document Services, Virgil asked. RICO charges. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Criminal enterprise targeting vulnerable elderly. Your case is the cornerstone. Once we have Mr. Brooks's testimony locked, we move on Meridian and everyone connected. I thought about the Ohio widow, the Michigan widower. 6 others may be caught in the same trap. What do you need from me? I asked. Hale set down the remote. Continued cooperation, detailed testimony, court appearances at trial, and we need you to stay exactly where you are for 2 to 3 more months. The room went quiet. Stay at Lakewood, I said. Under conservatorship, yes. Every day you're there, Leora thinks she's winning. She continues operating, potentially committing additional fraud we can document. If we pull you out now, she realizes we're moving, destroys evidence lawyers up immediately. But if you remain in place, if she believes you're declining, dying, she gets comfortable, makes mistakes. We build an ironclad case she can't defend. I looked at my hands on the table, right hand tremoring slightly, left steady. Hands that built a company, navigated rough water, made hard decisions, 30 years. Got 2 to 3 months, I repeated. Minimum. Maximum 6, if trial preparation requires it. I know what we're asking, Mr. Brooks. Continued isolation, institutional living, medication control, daily indignity. Enduring the place she imprisoned you while we build the case to destroy her. He slid a document across. Federal Witness Cooperation Agreement. We need you to stand firm a few more months. Can you do that? Virgil leaned forward. Before he signs anything, I've already filed an emergency motion in federal district court this morning to temporarily suspend the conservatorship for purposes of this cooperation. Judge Hale's counterpart on the civil side signed the order an hour ago. Floyd has full legal standing to execute this agreement. I picked up the pen. Thought about 2 dead victims who never got justice. Thought about Celeste risking everything to document truth. Thought about Merritt tracing money through criminal networks. Thought about the chairman. I'd been the one who made strategic decisions, who accepted short-term pain for long-term victory. Thought about the Ohio widow dying before anyone prosecuted her abusers. The Michigan widower whose family never sought justice. The Indiana woman too damaged now to help herself. Thought about infrastructure designed to prey on the vulnerable elderly, selling fraud as a service to people willing to steal from their own families. I could endure 3 more months at Lakewood. Could endure the isolation, the indignity, the institutional food and fluorescent lights and medication games. Could maintain the performance of decline while documenting every fraud Leora attempted. Could stand firm while federal agents built the case that would dismantle the entire network. I signed my name at the bottom. I can stand firm, I said. Agent Hale reached across the table and shook my hand, careful of the tremor. Mr. Brooks, thank you. We'll bring her down. Virgil drove me back to Lakewood that afternoon. The marshals had returned to Detroit. We took the unmarked sedan south through gray Michigan winter bare trees passing outside the windows. So you're sure about this? Virgil asked quietly. 3 more months minimum? 6 maximum? That's a long time inside that place. I'm sure, I said. I'd spent nearly 2 months learning patience. Learning to control tremors, to perform weakness, to think strategically while appearing confused. Learning that sometimes the only way to win was to let your opponent believe they'd already won. A few more weeks was nothing. We pulled into Lakewood's parking lot at 4 p.m. Staff wheeled me back to room 12B. Everything exactly as I'd left it that morning, institutional walls, thin blanket, reinforced window overlooking the facility garden. I was a federal witness now, cooperating with authorities to dismantle criminal infrastructure preying on elderly victims across the Midwest. And Leora had no idea the trap was already closing. Brent clipped the voice recorder inside his shirt pocket at breakfast and acted like everything was normal. 3 days earlier, Agent Hale had called Virgil with a change of plans. Leora had discovered Floyd's identity as Chairman Merritt's surveillance confirmed she'd run the Google search, seen the photograph, made the calls. She was panicking, which meant she might destroy evidence or disappear. The FBI moved the timeline forward. Floyd would leave Lakewood within the week under cover of the scheduled medical transport. The trap would close sooner than expected. I learned about this later, much later, when everything came together. But understanding what my son was doing while I sat in Lakewood matters because our paths were converging whether either of us realized it yet. The recorder was small, digital voice activated. Brent had bought it the day after discovering his father was the nursing home patient Leora was liquidating. He'd clipped it to his shirt pocket every morning since, turned it on whenever she was home, and said nothing about what he knew. Cowardice, maybe, or strategy. The line between them gets thin sometimes. First few days captured nothing useful. Small talk about facility complaints, medication, management, asset transfer timelines. Leora spoke freely, believing Brent too weak or too complicit to investigate. He asked casual questions, "How was Lakewood today?" And she answered without suspicion. "Same, he's declining steadily." "That's difficult for you." Brent would say, the concern in his voice practiced. Leora never questioned it. Why would she? Her husband had avoided complicated emotions his entire adult life. This was just Brent being Brent, distanced, uncomfortable, unwilling to engage with unpleasant realities. She didn't realize he was documenting every word. Over 4 weeks in early December, the recordings accumulated. Leora on phone calls with unknown contacts, discussing timeline pressure, financial urgency. She mentioned asset liquidation schedule and facility expenses accelerating and need resolution before fiscal year end. Spoke about legal documentation and transfer approvals and medical proxy decisions. Brent said nothing. Just kept the recorder running and backed up files to encrypted cloud storage every night. Then came the 3 statements that crossed from suspicious to criminal. 1st December 8th evening. Leora on phone in the study door half closed. Brent in hallway with recorder active. "He can't live through the year with Parkinson's that severe," she said. Not sad, not worried, satisfied. 2nd December 12th morning. Leora at kitchen table, laptop open, talking to someone on speakerphone. "Meridian will handle the rest of the documentation," she said. "They've been reliable so far." Admitting to outside forgery service. On recording. With timestamp. 3rd December 15th, late evening. Leora and someone Brent couldn't identify the voice discussing financial projections in the living room. "Once he's gone, Brooks Harbor gets the liquidity injection it needs. 18 million solves everything. Connecting my death directly to my son's business survival. Making Brent complicit whether he wanted to be or not. He had evidence. Recordings proving elder abuse, conspiracy fraud. And he still didn't call police. Didn't call a lawyer. Didn't drive to Lakewood to see if his father was actually dying or being killed slowly through institutional neglect. Just kept clipping the recorder to his pocket every morning. Then his business collapsed. Chititsa, December 18th, bank courier delivered notice of loan default to Brooks Harbor construction offices. $18.6 million owed 30 days to cure or foreclosure proceedings would begin. The largest project, container dock expansion at Port Sheldon, had collapsed when the general contractor declared bankruptcy mid-construction. 3 clients were suing for deposit returns. Credit rating dropped overnight. Brent's company was imploding. He called 12 potential investors over 3 days. None answered or returned calls. Credit agencies had flagged Brooks Harbor as high risk. No private equity firm would touch a defaulting contractor with pending lawsuits and incomplete projects. Brent sat in his office on December 20th, staring at financial statements that showed complete ruin. Everything he'd built for 15 years gone in 3 weeks of cascading failures. Only one entity had the liquidity and local connection to potentially help Brooks Maritime Holdings. He researched the company, found the same articles he'd read weeks earlier when discovering his father's identity. Brooks Maritime privately held $186 million in assets operating under board governance since chairman disappeared March 2023. Brent drafted an email to the executive offices. Professional, desperate. Requesting emergency meeting to discuss potential investment partnership or acquisition interest in Brooks Harbor construction. He sent it not knowing he was asking his imprisoned father for rescue money. I received the meeting request through my Brooks Maritime board, the same board I'd secretly contacted via Celeste's smuggled laptop. They forwarded Brent's email with a simple question. "Chairman, do you want to see him?" I sat in room 12B at Lakewood, reading my son's desperate request on a phone Celeste had provided. Brent Mercer, owner, Brooks Harbor Construction, seeking emergency meeting regarding investment partnership. Professional language barely concealing panic. My son, who I hadn't spoken to in 4 years before Leora imprisoned me. Who'd built his business without my help, kept his distance, constructed a life separate from mine. Who'd married the woman systematically destroying me and apparently didn't know or hadn't cared until his own survival required intervention. I could have ignored the request. Let the board decline the meeting with corporate speak about portfolio focus and strategic priorities. Let Brent's business die the way Leora intended me to die. Instead, I typed 3 words to my CEO, schedule the meeting. Within 24 hours, Brent received email confirmation from Brooks Maritime executive offices. Chairman would see him personally. Floor 31, Brooks Maritime Tower, December 28, 2 p.m. Leora overheard Brent mention the meeting that evening. He was on phone with his CFO discussing which financial documents to bring when she walked into his office. Our Brooks Maritime confirmed the meeting. Brent said into the phone, then noticed Leora in the doorway. Her face went rigid. You're meeting with them, why? They're the only investors left who'll see me. He watched her expression change, calculation, replacing surprise, then fear she tried to hide. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't have other options. Meetings in 8 days. Leora couldn't block it. Couldn't explain why Brent shouldn't meet with Brooks Maritime's chairman without revealing she controlled that chairman, that the missing executive was her husband's father, imprisoned at Lakewood, supposedly incompetent. Blocking the meeting would expose the entire scheme. She was trapped by her own deception. Fine, she said finally. But be careful. They're ruthless negotiators. Brent scheduled the meeting. Prepared financial documents. Rehearsed his pitch. Made plans to meet the chairman of Brooks Maritime, the man whose company he hoped would save his business. He had no idea that chairman was his father. I had 8 days to prepare for the son who'd abandoned me to walk into Brooks Maritime Tower and ask for money he didn't know was already his inheritance. 8 days to decide what I'd say to him. 8 days before everything converged. Leora saw the email confirmation over Brent's shoulder. Chairman of Brooks Maritime Holdings will see you December 28th, floor 31. I learned about her discovery from Merritt, who'd been monitoring her digital activity for the FBI. Understanding how she realized what was coming matters, because it shows the moment she knew she'd lost. 5 days before our meeting, Leora stood behind Brent, reading the confirmation. She'd been suspicious about Brooks Maritime, but unable to block it without exposing her control over me. Now the company name registered, Brooks Maritime, Maritime Industry. My conservatorship file listed former employment as Maritime Industry Professional. Who exactly are you meeting? She asked. The chairman, Brent said. They didn't give a name. I need to use your computer. She went to his office, typed Brooks Maritime Chairman into Google. First image, 2019 board meeting photograph. Man in navy suit, silver hair, confident posture. Caption N.W. Brooks. Chairman Brooks Maritime Holdings. Leora zoomed in. Me. 15 pounds heavier, no tremor, but unmistakably me. Patient 12B. The confused man she'd imprisoned. The dying Parkinson's victim. Chairman of a company worth $186 million. Merritt's monitoring captured her frantic searches. Brooks Maritime Ownership, Northwest Brooks biography. She'd been destroying the chairman of Michigan's largest private maritime company. She called Meridian Document Services. On the Mercer conservatorship, she said, voice tight. Is Floyd Mercer still at Lakewood? Long pause. We don't have current status. Your healthcare proxy paperwork wasn't renewed last month per your instructions. Yeah, I never gave those instructions. The renewal cancellation came through your proxy account. If you didn't authorize it, Leora ended the call. She hadn't canceled that paperwork. Someone else had moved pieces. Someone with legal authority, federal backing. Floyd, or whoever represented him, had been operating while she thought he was dying. She'd been outplayed. And in 5 days, her husband would meet the chairman she'd tried to erase. 3 days before the meeting, I stood in Virgil's apartment putting on a suit for the first time in 11 months. Navy Brooks maritime suit, tailored. The one I'd worn to board meetings and negotiations. Not facility-issued gray sweatpants. The suit of a chairman. My hands shook buttoning the shirt. The tremor was controlled but still present. Took longer, but I completed it. Adjusted the tie. Navy silk. Looked at Virgil's mirror. Older, thinner, tremor visible, but posture straightening, eyes clear. Institutional defeat fading. Still fits, I said. You've lost weight, but yes. Virgil watched. You look like yourself again. I need to look like the chairman, not the victim. We moved to the living room, where Merritt had laid out evidence folders. Folder 1. Dr. Frost's forged report with metadata showing alteration from Leora's computer. Digital fingerprints proving federal medical tampering. Folder 2. Merritt's financial forensics tracing $2.4 million transferred through shell companies. Wire fraud complete trail. Folder 3. Celeste's institutional evidence shift. Logs, medication, denial documentation, incident reports, with altered timestamps, security footage from my fall. Elder abuse prosecutable. Folder 4, FBI arrest warrant for Leora Mercer, signed pending my signal. Charges wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, falsifying medical records, elder abuse. 40 years potential prison. I reviewed each page, evidence overwhelming. Case complete. Everything you need to bury her legally, Virgil said. Merritt nodded. FBI warrant signed. After the meeting with Brent, we move. Virgil poured coffee. My hand shook holding it, but I managed. Want me at the meeting? He asked. No. This needs to be father and son first. Chairman and supplicant second. He still doesn't know you're his father. 20 years I'd kept that secret. Built the company, while Brent built his own business separately, each of us unaware how close our worlds ran in parallel. Never told him the chairman who ran Brooks Maritime was the man who'd raised him alone after his mother died. Never told him the harbor leases his docks connected to belonged to a company his father owned. I told myself it was protection, that knowing would change how he built things, make him feel smaller, or make him feel entitled. I wanted him to know his worth without measuring it against mine. I'd honored that promise 4 decades. Been the chairman everyone knew, and the father no one suspected. Tomorrow Brent would walk into Brooks Maritime Tower seeking an investor. Take elevator to floor 31, sit across from the chairman, discover that chairman was the father who'd been missing from his life. The father who'd watched from distance. The father he'd avoided because complicated relationships were easier ignored. The father his wife had tried to destroy. I looked at Virgil's mirror one last time. Man looking back wasn't patient 12B. Wasn't the confused man who couldn't remember his company. Wasn't the victim. I was Floyd Mercer, chairman of Brooks Maritime Holdings, father of Brent Mercer. Tomorrow my son would meet him for the first time. I'd spent 7 weeks in Lakewood enduring isolation, medication, denial, institutional defeat. 7 weeks performing decline while building evidence. 7 weeks watching Leora think she'd won while I positioned every piece. The Brooks Maritime Board knew I was returning. FBI knew I was ready. Virgil and Merritt had compiled evidence that would bury Leora in federal charges. Tomorrow the trap would close. But first, I needed to face my son. Tell him the businessman he'd come begging was the father who'd raised him in secret. Explain why I'd stayed hidden 40 years. Show him evidence his wife had tried to destroy me. Ask if he'd known, or suspected, or looked away because knowing was harder than ignorance. Virgil handed me a folder, talking points, legal documents, corporate materials. I took it knowing I wouldn't need it. This wasn't business negotiation. This was father meeting son for the first time as himself. I left Virgil's apartment wearing the chairman's suit. Drove through Detroit winter night toward the hotel where I'd stay until tomorrow. In 24 hours, everything would converge. Evidence would deploy. Arrest warrants would execute. Truth would surface. My son would learn who his father really was. I took last look in mirror. Man looking back wasn't patient 12B. Was Floyd Mercer chairman. Tomorrow my son meets him for first time in his life. At 9 a.m., Brent walked into the boardroom on the 31st floor, briefcase in hand, unaware that the chairman's chair faced the window, hiding me from view. I watched him through the gap in the leather headrest. He stood near the long table overlooking the Grand Rapids harbor, flanked by board members Virgil and Merritt. He had come expecting a ruthless corporate investor to save his failing firm. He had no idea he was standing before the father he had abandoned. "Mr. Mercer, please sit across from the chairman," a board member directed. Brent began his rehearsed pitch detailing his firm's struggles, but I slowly rotated the chair. As my Navy suit and Brooks Maritime insignia pin came into view, followed by the familiar tremor in my right hand and my face, he stopped mid-sentence. Color drained from his expression. For 11 seconds, the room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. "You're the chairman," he finally rasped. "I am your father." I replied, my voice steady despite the Parkinson's. "And I am the chairman of Brooks Maritime. Both facts have been true for 40 years. You are simply learning them today." He sank into the chair as I methodically placed 3 folders on the table: Dr. Frost's forged medical reports, Merritt's financial forensics detailing the $2.4 million in wire fraud, and the evidence of my institutional abuse. Brent's face paled as he realized the depth of the betrayal. He then reached into his briefcase and produced a digital recorder. I knew something was wrong. He admitted playing 6 weeks of recordings, Leora plotting my death and admitting to her reliance on a forgery network. "I searched your name and found the chairman photo. I've been documenting everything like a coward." "You are here now," I said. 2 FBI agents entered the boardroom, signaling that the trap had closed. I stood, my hand shaking, and walked around the table to my son. "Parkinson's makes my hands shake," I told him, holding them out. "But it never made me forget how to think or how to love you. The one who truly lost her mind wasn't me." Brent, 40 years old, and finally seeing the truth, collapsed against my chest, the weight of decades breaking open. Through the window, I watched FBI agents escort Leora out in handcuffs. I looked down at the harbor I had named after him when he was a boy, realizing that some names earn their permanence not through wealth, but through the courage to stand firm. The harbor would keep its name not for the business, but for the son who finally found his courage, and for the father who endured 11 months of captivity to bring him home. Task 6.1. My hand shook while holding the Bible at the witness stand, but the federal courtroom fell silent as I began to speak. 3 weeks after Leora's arrest, I stood before a judge ready to articulate the nightmare she had inflicted. She forged medical records to declare me incompetent. I testified, my voice level and precise. She had me institutionalized, denied me essential medication, and systematically dismantled my life while stealing millions. She treated me as a dying, confused patient, never realizing I was documenting her every move. Evidence flooded the courtroom screens: the altered neurologist report, with digital fingerprints leading back to her computer, the financial forensics tracing millions through shell companies, and Brent's recorded evidence. Every claim I made was backed by ironclad documentation born of 11 months of strategic patience. During cross-examination, the defense attorney attempted to challenge my mental state due to my Parkinson's diagnosis. My testimony aligns with 6 independent sources of digital and institutional records, I replied firmly. If I am confused, then the computers, security cameras, and medical professionals are also confused. That is not confusion. That is evidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts: wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, falsifying medical records, and elder abuse. Judge Clayton sentenced Leora to 12 years in federal prison without parole. The criminal network she utilized, Meridian Document Services, was dismantled by federal authorities. The system had finally worked. That afternoon, I sat on a park bench near the courthouse, my old Silverado parked at the curb. Brent approached me, looking weary in his court suit. He sat at the far end of the bench, 3 feet of cold wooden slats between us. "Can you tell me what I did to you?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I looked at my trembling hands. "Nothing you did. Something you didn't do." "I knew in April," he confessed. "I Googled your name, saw the chairman photograph, and realized Leora was lying. I was afraid that if you were right, I would have to face myself. I was a coward who let his father rot because confronting the truth was harder than believing a lie." "You're here now," I said. I pulled a prepared document from my pocket. 4 non-negotiable conditions for reconciliation: weekly dinners, financial transparency, individual therapy, and an absolute commitment to the truth. I finished reading and folded the paper. "These are my requirements. You meet them, or we don't rebuild." Brent stared at his hands for a long moment before meeting my gaze. "When can I start?" he asked. It was the truest thing he had said in years, and for the first time, the path forward felt real. I signed the documents irrevocably, transferring 92% of Brooks Maritime Holdings into 2 trusts: the Floyd W. Mercer Scholarship Fund for Maritime Families and the Great Lakes Maritime Workers Welfare Fund. The remaining 8% went to Brent, granting him voting rights without the danger of unearned wealth. Virgil watched in silence as I signed. My hands shook, but the decision felt lighter than anything I had carried in decades. I was no longer interested in dynasty. I wanted a legacy rooted in purpose. A week after the trial, I returned to my lakeside cabin in Leland. It was exactly as I had left it 11 months earlier, caught in a time capsule of half-finished watch repairs and cold coffee. While I sorted through my tools, I heard a familiar truck pull into the driveway. Brent had arrived. I did not rush out to greet him. I kept working on a chronometer, giving him the space to choose his path. After a few minutes, he stepped into the workshop holding a small wooden box. "Can I come in?" he asked. I simply nodded. He set the box on my workbench and opened it to reveal the antique pocket watch I had been repairing the very day the marshals arrived. "I found it in the workshop before Leora could liquidate anything," he said quietly. "I kept it safe. I thought you might want to finish what you started." I picked up the watch. The mechanism was still frozen at 2:17 p.m., the exact moment my life had been dismantled by forgery and fraud. I looked at the intricate gears and then at my son. "Sit," I told him. "I'll show you how to fix it." It was the first time in 40 years he had stepped into my shop, and the first time he had asked me to teach him something. I handed him the jeweler's loop and showed him how to hold the screwdriver, explaining how to work with a tremor rather than fighting against it. "First lesson is patience," I said. "You cannot rush tiny mechanisms. Force them and they break. Respect them and they tell you what they need." Outside Lake Michigan was a flat mirror under the afternoon sun. Inside, father and son leaned over a timepiece frozen in time. There were no dramatic speeches or forced apologies, only the quiet, rhythmic work of repair. Brent asked questions and I answered, guiding his hands as he navigated the microscopic gears. For 11 months, the cabin had been a tomb of loneliness, and for decades before that, it had been a place of silent avoidance. Now there were two voices, and the steady collective focus on a frozen timepiece. As Brent adjusted his chair to see the parts more clearly, the cabin felt different. For the first time in years, it was no longer quiet with loneliness. At our third monthly coffee meeting in Sutton's Bay, Brent mentioned therapy unprompted. It had been 3 weeks of following my 4 conditions weekly Tuesday dinners, financial transparency for his construction firm therapy, and absolute honesty. Brent arrived on time, ordered black coffee, and put his phone away. He seemed different, grounded. Therapy's helping, he admitted. I understand why I was easy to manipulate. I'm working on it. I listened without offering quick fixes. When he finished, I set a boundary regarding his struggling business. I won't save it again, I told him. You came to my office desperate for rescue. I gave you evidence instead. You are rebuilding on your own now. I can offer presence but not a bailout. He nodded, accepting the terms. Later that week, my routine felt fully restored. Sitting at my workshop bench, I held the antique pocket watch Brent had returned. It was running perfectly. My Parkinson's hadn't vanished, the tremor remained, but my perspective had shifted. I no longer viewed the shaking as a betrayal of my body, but simply a part of my life. I drove my 12-year-old Silverado to the garage for its routine maintenance. Tom, my mechanic, suggested an upgrade, noting my wealth. You could buy the whole dealership, he remarked. I looked at my reliable truck and smiled. I don't need anything I don't need. It was the first time in months I felt genuine contentment. I had survived the trial, secured my legacy through the funds I created, and was rebuilding my relationship with my son. I didn't need grand triumphs. I needed the quiet satisfaction of knowing who I was. That evening, a customer brought in her grandfather's watch for repair. I picked up my jeweler's screwdriver. My right hand trembled, but the gear moved into position anyway. I wound the crown, and the watch began to tick, a steady, rhythmic sound in the quiet cabin. I looked back at the last 11 months. I had been patient 12B, isolated and trapped in a facility while Leora dismantled my life. I had been told I was incompetent, dying, and delusional. Yet I hadn't been helpless. I had been strategic, gathering evidence piece by piece, until I could dismantle the criminal network that tried to erase me. Now I was simply a man fixing watches again. I looked at my shaking hands under the lamplight. They had built a maritime empire and raised a son alone. The tremor was familiar now, like an old argument I had stopped fighting. Parkinson's makes my hands shake, but the clock still runs. And perhaps that is all that's needed. And to you listening to my story, remember this: patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. Looking back, my only mistake was waiting so long to protect my assets properly. I thought family meant trust. I thought success meant immunity from betrayal. I was wrong. Don't make my mistake. The moment you sense something isn't right, document it. The moment you feel isolated, reach out to someone you trust. Don't wait for the trap to close. What I learned is this: family justice isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. When someone wrongs you, especially family, stand firm and document truth. Let consequences follow naturally. I believe God's timing was perfect. If I'd moved too fast, Leora would have destroyed evidence. If I'd given up, she'd have targeted others. Dad's revenge stories like mine aren't about anger, they're about strategic patience. Real family justice protects future victims through documented truth and proper channels. If my story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Have you experienced something similar? What would you have done differently? Share this with someone who needs to hear that family justice is possible. If you enjoy Dad's revenge stories where patience wins, subscribe to Wise Revenge for more stories about standing firm. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time and attention mean more than you know. One final note: while this story, like many Dad's revenge stories, contains fictionalized details for narrative impact, the lessons about patience, documentation, and strategic justice are very real. I hope you take something meaningful from it.